Grenade! Granada! Suck, dude. Made me nervous.
I am at Bravo! Hey, I'm at Alpha!
That was a guy.
Watch your eyes! Alright, we captured Bravo! Good! I'm at Charlie, Alpha! Captured! We got it!
Oh, no. In the open, I knew it, dude. It's just, why put me right there, even? Where is that? I'm gonna plunk him in the head right here, right now. Ready?
Now it's clear! We're down! It's hit! We're losing Charlie! There, Charlie!
I need to spawn up here again, please. Oh my gosh, you're the slowest mounter ever.
Securing Charlie!
I know there's a guy in there, but
Too simple. Easy. 5'11". Fucking motherfucker, you fucking.
I went 3 and done.
Fucking motherfucker.
Too simple. Didn't you pack him out with snappers the whole time?
Fucking dog shit.
Shut the fuck up, pussy ass.
No, I'm gonna see you pack him out with snappers the whole time.
I don't have my jump your chest out, boy. You ain't shit, boy. Shut the fuck out of you, boy. Beat your ass.
Trash.
You ain't shit, boy. Fuck you, fuck up, bro. Fuck you talking about, bro? Fat L. I'm dead. Yeah, what's it like?
oh my goodness.
Autism.
Maybe I've got to get a different gun. I don't know. Like, what's the...
Boys know what's up.
Best insurgency gun? Oh my. Okay, so I think Mark is he's a marksman, and he uses this right here. Tracer rounds, of course. Optic. 2x holographic. Compensator.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Really? What? I thought I had more points than this. Okay, I guess that's what I'm rocking.
Grab your weapons!
Alright, it's kitty. Where you at? Where you at? Hey, where you at?
Are we on the comms though? What's up with it? Yo, pussy.
I'm gonna die from the back right here. That guy was AFK. I didn't even see him. I was blind.
I'm capturing him!
Can I be the king of... Dude, I scoped out right as I... Yeah, let me raise my seat up. Alright, I'm up all the way, and I'm in close. Here we go. About to beat this. I'm backing you up, homie.
Come in.
Come on, do it.
Hello? Hello?
Do it.
What are you doing? Stop! Hey! We have enemy at sea! Using flashbang!
The tank riding is crazy.
Déjale melón.
Papa.
Oh my god.
Ow. Hey, stop.
Enemy down at Bravo.
Stop.
He didn't say sorry. You said sorry. He didn't say sorry. Enemy down at Bravo.
Hey, where you at? I hear you. Ah, yeah. Megged him. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this game mode.
Good one.
I don't know what's up here. I got him.
Fuck!
Boy, kill me. Ooh. I can't see him.
We are losing!
Got you, fucker.
Dude, I suck so much. So, settings, binds. Okay. Binds, I guess. Sensitivities. Is there no sense? Look, sensitivity. As way too high before.
Okay,
2x.
we captured A.
Yes. That feels a little better. Where, dude? This game just like camp sucks so much.
What the fuck?
I pulled the trigger.
Where the hell?
We're capturing B.
Like, is there a different game mode that I can play?
Enemy at A. We're taking B. Hey, reload A. It's gone.
I shot.
Get on A.
Oh my gosh, dude. That right there is. Ooh,
Enemy at B.
how does that not kill him? I mean, I'm just gonna. This gun sucks too. Let's go back. I mean, I just don't know what to use. Like.
Get on A.
I feel like a PKM is gonna go insane. M29 though, like who knows? Give me a 2x. There's a red dot. Compensator. Laser sight. Alright. Alright, loot, loot. I don't need recoil. Be mad trash talking after this. I mean, I'm just in physical.
I'm at B.
Hello, motherfucker.
They're capturing C. Fuck.
I mean, who finds this fun? Nobody. That's who. Like, no.
I'm at A. Hey, let it be. Enemy just captured B.
Alright, look at that. That's. I can maybe.
Good one.
horrible
That's
game.
the first time I ever got 20.
Well, this game sucks.
Yeah?
Go play Fortnite.
You guys aren't capturing objectives still.
I don't like Fortnite.
And you're black, so what's your point?
Oh,
Yeah, I got fucking one, dude.
Actually,
I got two dogs.
capturing objectives.
I don't know what the best mode is here. I don't know if this will be any better. I'm about to just go get my Xbox out and play Destiny 2 for the rest of the night. Because this is miserable.
Oh shit! They got Alpha!
Okay. Oh boy.
We're losing Charlie!
Okay.
How many fucking people are over there? It was just me. No, somebody else shot me right after I shot you.
Oh no, no, I fucking shot at you and then I ran and hide.
Get ready!
Green to green, dude. Let's go. Hey, I'm gonna load up. You're in trouble now, asshole.
Okay, let's move!
Yeah, the Grand is like way better.
I don't like this site. I should have swapped.
On B, on B.
One more's on B. Right side of B.
One off Bravo.
He's dead.
Yeah.
One more than.
Bravo.
Easy.
Holy Lord. So if you just take him out? Oh yeah, boy, look at that. Nope, that's not the side I had. Stamina recoup. So it's Q, right? Q? It's X? There we go.
We're capturing B!
In the
Bravo clear.
corner, bro. Desire attack the teammate. Seriously?
Come on, dude.
Really fucking scoped.
Why?
You stood right in front of me, my guy.
You shot through me.
You were in between he and I.
This
and
game
I
did
started
not
shooting
suck.
him first.
in
Couldn't
our
see.
game,
Fucking
guys.
teammate was camping behind the dumpster like the fucking trash bitch he is.
All right.
Radine!
Yalla, get moving!
I don't know, like, little point, like, hey, we normally engage about here.
Right in front of me, watch out. Dead.
One more on the street.
Another one dead. Two dead, two dead.
I'm changing
Two dead outside Bravo.
There's game
Wait, outside
One more
Bravo.
on my body.
Another one dead outside Bravo. Go to A. Go to A. Go to A. Go to A.
Nice.
Can I get a 3-piece? Motherfuckers get taken down the
boys, I'm getting out of here.
No, you're not.
Yes, I gotta go.
Watch this. Dunk. Holy lord, that game sucks. I would rather play Roblox, Super Auto Pits, Totally Echo Battlegrounds, Valorant. Valorant's an AV one too. But jeez Louise, like, I mean, I don't even. Ugh. It's just horrid. I don't really play. I mean, there's. Mm, I don't know, man. It's so bad. It's just. Oh, it's terrible. Alright, so I might literally go get. I mean, there's PUBG. I don't know anything about PUBG, though. That's the thing. Not a thing about pub. Ooh. I mean, I would enjoy Destiny 2. So I'm going to go grab my Xbox and hope. Cause dude, that game's just it's a camp fest. The maps are horrible. It's a trash game. Quite literally. Chat highlight settings? What is this? First time chat. Oh, I like this. Heck, yo. Close. Yep. Alright, I'm just gonna go grab that. And then I'm gonna set up my cam. But good lord, that sucks. It just, it's so bad. Oh my, now to set up the old Xbox. Got to turn on the flashlight. Figure this out. Yeah. Okay, first plug it up. Oh, this hurts so much. Oh, it hurts. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. Sheesh, bro. And like, you know, with Xbox, if I want to play, you know, like Battlefield 1 or something else, then I can. But that piece of, I mean, that's just a piece of garbage game. It just is. I hate to say it, but like, holy. So now I got to get my Xbox going. Don't switch. And go ahead and close Discord. That's there. Oh, okay. I don't know if console would be different. Probably is, but oh my! That's just a miserable experience. Why am I missing games? I mean, I guess update all. Update? Oh, I mean, that's a good game, bro. Do I still have Battlefield 1 here, though? Okay, so Crisis. Sniper Elite. Rise. Where's BF1? Where's all my Battlefields at? Oh, I'm an idiot. Start Battlefield 1, see what happens, man. World War Z, is that even worth an update? No. How do I change my stream title? Stream? Advanced. I guess I can't. Oh, well, that's getting set up. Might as well go get my camera. about to be risque because I've got no pants on. Can I do this like somehow without being like too obnoxiously high? So obnoxiously high. What does that mean? Well, let me turn on my cam here. I don't have pants on, so this is a risky play by me. That's for sure. I haven't played Battlefield 1 in 2 years. Yeah. So who knows how this is about to go? That's the way it's gotta be, huh? That's retarded, man. I don't know if I like that as much. Oh, that haircut though. I feel like it'd like better over here, but again. Knocking over this TV, but it's alright. It's good for the cause. Yikers. I need an extension cord, man. And the Lord provides. No. Whoa. Multiplayer? I never did play the campaign of this. I don't think, at least. Alright, now I can do whatever. Oh, dang it. You saw everything. Oh no, me and my black shorts. Hang on. The decency. Ooh, hey, that's actually not that bad. I don't like this cord right there, but other than that, all right, let's give her a look-see. Bada-doom. Bada-doom. Let's do my intermission here. Can you see the haircut? You can. Not as well from this side though. That's okay. So properties, auto, specific window, 4K capture utility. actually not that bad. Maybe up a little bit more, right? Testing 1, 2, 3. I can't see how many viewers I've got, but I think it's just me right now anyway, so. There it is. I kind of like it on the left side, to be honest with you. Just do
The
base
Great
game.
War was dominated by battles rooted in capturing.
Let's see what it looks like. Dude, I haven't played this in so long. It's gonna be amazing. Oh, man. It's music, too. Oh. Sick. So people still play this, I assume, on the Xbox. Got me some beautiful oysters. Get you an oyster, get you a saltine cracker. It's delicious. So apparently this is not a quick game. Huh. I'm echoing. There's only one person here. I'm that one. Alright, well, this game's dead. Let's check out Battlefield 5. See what it looks like, I guess. Ooh, I might go get me a drink here in a second, too. Ooh. So good. So good. I'm a new man now. Huh. Dude, these Battlefield games take so long. Alright, so you don't see my beautiful underwear again. I'm gonna go grab a drink while this loads. Okay, I need to raise my camera. This needs to be a little higher, right? So like, but not like too much higher. Too much higher would be like weird. All right. Yeah. Oh, there's no way. There's. Oh wow. Okay. Please just let me in the game. I feel good. Where I went now. So good. So good. I'm a new man now. I don't know what these even are. So let's just do TDM. Let's see, will this be more entertaining than Destiny? There's something about Mountain Dew. It just, excuse me, it just hits the spot. Okay, so I'm gonna rant one more time. I cannot even express how awful, I truly mean awful, Insurgency Sandstorm is. It is camp the game. Let me find an angle and watch. Hey, they can, if they spawn here, they have to walk out this door, and let me just hard scope it for the whole game and not move. Garbage. Garbage game. Mark, if you watch this later, your game sucks. It sucks. I mean, I hate to tell you, it does. Like, this game just takes forever to load. I think I'm in a bad mood. Wait, look. Oh. So the BAR? Yeah. I already dislike this scope. I'm trying to attack sprint. I just want to kill. I'm hungry for it. Whoa. Oh, that's satisfying. It's a little sensitive. I'll admit. Good Lord. Oh, this stupid mechanic. Okay, so how do I customize? Customize? Here we go. Here we are. I already have more kills here than I did in the whole session of Insurgency. Because I again will state, Insurgency is a horrid game. Oh. They probably added a ton of new guns to this. Medic! Where am I going? See, in Insurgency, there'd be a guy up here, hard scoping this whole lane. Garbage game. What did he kill me with? Oh.
Bin getroffen. Brauche Sanitäter.
All right, teammate, he's up here to the right. Uh-huh. Okay. That's probably why I had that other scope. So this just doesn't have any ammo in it. It's a weird map.
That's half the forces eliminated. No time to rest.
Yeah, parkour. Parkour. Yeah, look at me. Insurgency Sandstorm. No, don't auto mantle, you idiot. Ooh. 12 bullets is not enough. Is he for real hiding? Like this is slower, much slower than So what other customize? Boom. Oh, that was good at one time. So I'm using the bar here. Oh, there were these stupid guns that had. The Lewis was great. And there's that shoddy. So, did we swap spawns? Dang it. My attention got so split. I don't know if I have the brain for PvP tonight. I really don't. Oh. Oh boy. How do I... Okay. Okay. I don't know how I got a message. About to own this whole lobby here. Never mind. That was pretty tilting. I'm not even gonna lie. My game is really quiet. Parkour. I forgot you had to heal. Oh my goodness, dude.
Ich sterbe. Ich brauche Hilfe.
Alright, well. That was enjoyable. I got a message. I don't know who these people are. Hang on.
You just unmute me, I'll play the daggone banjo, alright?
What?
You just unmute me, I'll play the daggone banjo.
If I unmute, I'll play the dadgum banjo. Alrighty. Alright, Destiny 2, here I come. Alright, this is just my happy game, my happy place. Everything else sucks. It's just not for me. I'm gonna go get my iPad. Oh. Get my crackers down. Get my iPad up. Okay. So, headset. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Please, just hurry. What can we listen to here? I just want regular old YouTube. Give me something interesting, some sort of Destiny lore. Uriah Faber versus Peter Gian. I just don't have the mental energy to deal with that. Okay, boom, Titan. Roasted by Chad Part 1. Getting roasted by Chad for 10 minutes. Tim the Tatman 2. Posted 8 hours ago. It's about time that I thought we'd never be together again. Here we are, and you're my best friend. You're always smug. Alright, open directories. Witch Queen. Launch. What can I watch? Why the Persians failed. Interesting. Can I skip this? I need something more interesting than this. The new CDL team. What? Hang on. What is my picture? Oh, just a clone. Oh, his finger got ripped off. There's nothing good to listen to whilst I game. Alright, boom. Here we go.
Maybe we got some more content here that apparently you all love. Recently we did a video that was similar to this, where essentially people just roast me for 10 minutes. Well, the editing team was like, they loved it, so do it again. So here we are. Enjoy this and Psycho Media. Drop a like on this, share with a friend, sub, ring the bell. Most importantly, be sure to tell somebody you love them. All right, I'll catch you in the next one. I mean, it literally looks like Heaven's Gate is like right in my corner, right? I'm done trying to keep Kevin up here. I give up, all right? I picked him up 7 times today, and he doesn't want it. I'm trying to see if there is a dimmer.
Your bald head shines brighter than that sign.
We're in some kind of crop field.
What you see is a window into the golden age. Mars has returned with temporal instabilities.
Did you cut your hair yet, bozo? Let's see that dome.
We believe the reappearance of Mars drove her out of hiding.
I did not cut my hair, and I'm not going to show you my hair right now, okay? Thank you.
How about those roughing the passer calls this week? What a joke from the NFL.
Dude, the roughing the passer one last night, unbelievable. Chiefs still won, but that was crazy.
My wife asked me as I've seen the dog bowl today. I replied, I never knew he did.
I'm gonna be honest, the very first time I heard that, I didn't get it, but now I get it. I didn't get it when I first heard it, but now I understand it, and it is fine.
Thanks.
Tim the Bullfrog is hitting so crazy good after the last update. It's kills so fast and it's just got a huge buff. It's crazy. Try it for a game, you'll see what I mean. It's crazy busted.
Is it crazy, though? I'm not using the Bullfrog.
My friend's son wants to be a big COD streamer like you. Other than putting on a lot of weight and learning how to fall to his death a lot, any suggestions on what he can do? Hi Fatty, I went through so much this year. You were an inspiration to all of the fat and bald people all around the world. You helped me a lot, but I am still fucking depressed. Depress these nuts. Nothing under you. Tim, let's go. Plenty of real estate. One left. Just you, one-on-one, Tim. Tim, you got this.
Do I
nice
fight these tanks?
Let's go. You said it couldn't be done. Terry's the king. Put my crown.
There's no dimmer. Nice. There should be.
Tim, the Cowboys suck. Here's 1996 to remind you of the last time they won a Super Bowl.
Hey, how about you shut the hell up, huh? How's that sound?
How is golf going, dude? I got new mirrors. Best made irons in the world.
Here's what we're gonna do. Ready? We're going to hit this, and we're going to go to Dixie. Okay. Dixie Krypton. Creature we saw.
What I'm about to share is
it's
something
just
that is
OP, dude.
unbelievable, and I have survived a traumatic event that I wish had never happened. This event in time has left me where I have been robbed not only of my future, but also my past. I feel like someone might know something that might help me, but at this time, I'm deathly afraid to use my name because of the inquiries that may ensue if I do so. And I prefer that you keep this contact information to yourself. But feel free to read it, as there may be others that listen to your program that have had similar experiences. I will keep this short as possible, and I don't have much
I don't know what
strength
this
now,
game
and
is.
my
It's not bad.
memories are vague, but there are still pieces of everything since the event occurred. My first memory is standing in the middle of the road in the middle of a pitch black night, which might not be that unusual, except that I was completely naked, confused, scared, and unaware of how I got there,
That's
nor
such a-
even where this road was.
So naked and
Suddenly,
afraid.
there was a bright light racing toward me and a loud noise, and then another, and then another. Now you can envision how confused I must have been, having no idea what these things were. I thought maybe they were cars because they were honking at me and dodging me to keep from hitting me. Another vehicle came speeding toward me with red and blue lights, and a big guy jumped out of the car and came running up to me, yelling in a loud, rude voice. Well, I didn't understand what he was saying, and in fact, I was unable to even speak. And I must have looked like I was stoned out of my mind. And when he grabbed my arm, it felt like his hand was hot as fire and it burned. I remember jerking my arm away from him and screaming in pain instantly, and he didn't waste a second throwing his arm around my neck and tossing me face first onto the blacktop. The
Well, that
fear
sounds
I was
cool.
experiencing was beyond belief. It was like I was being attacked by a monster, and I felt like he was trying to hurt me. He handcuffed me and he threw me into the car, and he took me to the police station where he took my fingerprints and photos of me and then asked me questions for 2 hours, but I never understood a word of what he said. And after growing impatient, he handcuffed me again and drove me to the local hospital where they strapped me to a bed and started doing all types of tests on me. I now know they were testing me for drug and substances that were illegal through my blood and urine, which they took from me without my consent. I never understood what they were saying, nor where I actually was. And over the next 4 days, nothing changed until 2 uniformed soldiers, who I didn't recognize, entered my room and took the restraints off my wrists.
Alright, I'm about to
They
clap
put me
this
in
guy
dark
quite
brown
literally.
pants and shirt, and they gave me a pair of boots, and then they escorted me out to their vehicle. I was cuffed up again and driven to the airport and flown to Jacksonville, Florida, and admitted to the Naval Hospital. There, I was treated for my memory loss as well as minor radiation poisoning. I was put into a room by myself, and I had an endless flow
I
of
like this
doctors
guy.
and visitors over the next several weeks. And then 2 men and 2 women came to see me. I later discovered they were my parents, my fiancé, and my brother, whom I did not know at the time. And when I realized some months later, I felt horrible about that. They kept coming back for a
Yeah,
couple
watch
of weeks
this.
until
She's
the
gonna
only
do
one
all
that
the work
stayed
for me.
was my mother. And she kept coming back day in and day out. I still couldn't understand what she was saying or remember anything about them. She began to show me pictures, and she read me stories, and she told me of my childhood and sang songs and hymns over the next several months. And I finally began to remember bits and pieces of my life before that dark night in the middle of Utah. I grew more and more aware of my surroundings and my past as time went on, and my language skills started to return to me. I was so excited to realize that I was beginning to understand the doctors and nurses when they came in, as well as the people from Washington, who never seemed to be short of questions. I had no answers for most of what they were asking me, but was more than willing to listen and try. It was like my life was coming back to me slowly, and if these people could help me remember, I was game for anything. They attempted hypnosis as well as some truth drugs and some other drugs that should have helped me remember, but everything stopped. I only got to a certain point of memory.
Incandescent,
What was truly shocking was that it seems that the evening before I was found in Utah, I was at work some miles away, and in fact was over 2,800 miles away, in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle aboard the USS Ronald Reagan, which is one of the Navy's aircraft carriers. I apparently traveled over 2,800 miles in less than 3 hours, which is over 900 miles per hour, and the military was interested in how this occurred. They had quite a few theories about what happened. I was informed that I was on the USS Ronald Reagan, and we had just left Jacksonville after spending 5 months in the port, and I was headed back around South America to the Pacific. I was one of the deck crew as one of the blue crew or salvage wreck team, as well as an ordnance personnel, and I was told that I spent all my waking hours above deck, even when not on duty. When I missed muster the next morning and after a search of the ship, it was assumed that I had fallen overboard, and several aircraft were launched to comb the ocean looking for the needle in the haystack. 3 days later, when my prints and picture reached the military, they sent a police escort to retrieve me. Theory 1 was that I was AWOL from the time we left port and had someone covering for me on the ship, but too many people had witnessed me there aboard the ship. And the second was that I was some sort of spy. And the third was I was trying to get a Section 8 discharge. After 6 months in total at the hospital in Jacksonville, they transported me to Walter Reed in Bethesda, Maryland, to be examined by the nation's finest military medical staff. I had constant visitors there from Washington, as well as psychologists from the military and all types of doctors. They concluded that I was not lying to my superiors and brass, and that something had happened to me that impacted me so much that all my memory had been suppressed. I was in Walter Reed for 4 years in total, and I was discharged on a medical, and I received total disability. My case was classified until recently, in which it was unclassified at the same time as the UFO case files. It was then I saw the videos from the information release on the videos and photos taken from the deck of the USS Ronald Reagan the night I had vanished. Up until that time, I had no idea this could have been connected, and I wondered if this is what all the interest in me was for 5 years that I spent locked up in the hospitals. I had moved back in with my parents after leaving the hospital. I was still struggling with some of the most basic parts of living alone, such as driving and shopping and paying bills. And over the next several years, I experienced 2 more events where I was found walking miles away from my car, or where I was last seen some hours later. Both episodes, I had no memory of how I got there or what happened just prior to realizing that I was lost. I was seen at the VA every 4 months as my body was aging at a rate of 3 times the rate of a normal person. And now I'm going to tell you something that will blow your mind. Just 3 months ago, when going to Virginia, my brother slammed the van door shut on my hand, and something went wrong immediately. My hand erupted in pain like I had never experienced before. It was like I had struck my hand into a vat of hot oil, but it was inside my hand, not on the surface. A neon orange bruise the size of a silver dollar appeared under the skin and began to spread and grow, and I was rushed inside the hospital where they sedated me and went to work on my hand. When I woke, a massive portion of my hand had been removed, and there were officers from the military present again. I was informed that the impact of the van door on my hand had ruptured some sort of organic device the length of 20 millimeters and the diameter of a grain of rice, and it had tentacles stretching out over 6 inches from all over the surface area into my hand. They had located a point between my fingers where this device was implanted, yet I had no knowledge of what this was, nor where it came from, let alone when it happened. The next morning, I was back at Walter Reed, and they were now scanning my body looking for more of these devices, in which they located 17 more in different parts of my body, including my feet, hands, arms, neck, connected to my tailbone, as well as 2 that were implanted in my nostrils and into my brain. The decision was made to remove these devices, starting with all the ones in the extremities first and then tackling the 2 in my brain at a later time. As of now, all of the devices have been removed, with only some minor side effects to my eyesight and hearing. I've also begun to have nightmares of being held down under a bright light and my body put through painful experiments and surgeries, along with silvery-looking squid-type monsters looking down upon my immobile body. Today, I'm back with my parents, but I look like I'm over 80 years old.
Idiot.
My skin is wrinkled and my body is crippled up and my hands hurt from arthritis. My back is humped over and I have to walk with a walker to get around. I'm now 40 years old, and I wonder if I will see another year. And I wonder who has done this to me. And what were those devices that were removed from my body at Walter Reed, and what did the military do with them? Why haven't they told me anything that might give me an explanation as to what has happened? And I wonder if I was abducted that night by aliens from the deck of the USS Ronald Reagan and then deposited in Utah after they did a bunch of experiments to me and wiped my memory from my mind.
Implanted.
And last, what was the purpose of this, and why did they pick me? All right, welcome to the podcast. My name's Cam Buckner. This is the Dixie Cryptid YouTube podcast. I have 3 stories in this podcast. They are just freaking awesome. You're not going to believe them. What if they're true? All right, let's jump into it. Hope you guys enjoy it. All right, here we go.
You ugly.
3 years ago, my son, my brother, and I hunted a parcel of private land opening weekend of deer rifle season. We were in the woods before daylight. My brother didn't feel up to the physical stress of the hills we were about to assault, so he stayed close to the truck on flat ground. My son and I were going to walk the area to drive deer to each other. We called it deer kicking. 3 hours later, and not seeing a deer, my son suggested that we get to a higher elevation.
I like
His
this gun.
idea was that the deer were up there and we just needed to get to them. We started the trek up the hill and fought briars and brambles the whole way. We were exhausted when we got to the top. When we reached the top, we walked around the ridge trying to get a better look at the terrain below when we walked up on a large structure. Tree limbs were formed into an almost perfect shelter. I assumed someone had built this, but looking closer, it became clear this was not built by human hands. It was well built too, because my son crawled on top of it and walked around. It never gave an inch.
1, 2.
Built on the edge of a steep drop-off made me a bit nervous, so I got him to jump down and we backed away. We sat down and we had a smoke. Then he asked if I could detect a strong odor. I couldn't smell anything due to an accident years ago that took away my sense of smell, but he said it was strong. The first guess was that Bigfoot had built this thing. We both laughed that off and decided to move on back down the hill.
I mean, it's a joke how
Taking
easy
a
this
different route, we exited the thick brush and we stood on a ledge that gave us a great view of the valley below. In the distance, on the opposite hillside, I saw a dark figure scaling the mountain. I thought it was a bear, but I've never heard of bear in this area. I just watched for a minute. To see better, I raised my rifle
We have
scope
to
to
raise
my
difficulty
eye, and
is
I could
boring.
clearly see this thing was on 2 legs and it was covered in dark hair. I asked my son to keep it in his scope while I dug for a camera that I carried on all my hunts. It took me forever to dig this camera out, and while I was doing that, my son lowered his rifle to look at me and ask what was taking so long. And when he got the object back in his scope, it was just going over the top of the hill. Neither of us could believe that that thing made it up that hill so fast, but it was gone. In my mind, it was a bear. It had to be. The day was shot, so we headed back to the truck. We were about halfway back to the truck, and a rock whizzed by our heads and tumbled off into the brush. We stopped and looked around for the person who had thrown it, but we never saw anyone. Then I realized it had to be my brother messing with us, so I called him on the 2-way radio. He was close to the truck and emphatically insisted that he had not walked up that mountain. It was getting close to dark by now. We had not seen or heard an animal all day. No insects, birds, nothing. As we walked onto the truck, something was tracking us in the brush. While we walked, whatever was in the woods walked. If we stopped, it stopped. Limbs and twigs broke in the distance. We stopped and called out, hoping to get an answer from someone. Maybe we were on someone else's land. We got no answer, and then I recalled our joking that Bigfoot had built that structure that we had found, and now I wasn't laughing at that idea. The whole thing gave me an uneasy feeling, so we wasted no more time and we made it to the truck and out of the area in a hurry. Finally back at the truck and a bit unnerved, we started unloading our rifles and throwing our gear in the bed. We sat on the tailgate waiting for my brother to show up. I heard something in the brush off to my right. It was rustling in the brush. And then, like a bat out of hell, it took off running, and whatever it was big. It was crashing and tearing through the tangled mess like a bulldozer. It's hard to explain how this experience affected me. It really shook me up. If I heard an elephant crashing through the brush, I think it would sound the same. In the distance, I heard a sound that I will never be able to replicate. It was a sort of a howl or scream, and it was terrifying to my ears. The radio cracked, and it was my brother asking us if we had kicked up a deer, to which we both immediately responded, no, and to get back to the truck, we needed to go. He finally walked up, and I hurriedly pushed him in the truck. I started the engine, and I threw gravel behind me as I sped away.
Suck it.
And on the drive home, we recounted the story to him, and he was sure that we had encountered a bear. My son and I, we knew it wasn't a bear. We knew exactly what this thing was. The next year, we were told that this piece of land was posted and we no longer had permission to hunt it. That was fine with me. I wasn't going back to that place anyway. We got permission to hunt land not far from this location the next year. There are signs of Bigfoot on this property too, but they never messed with us, so we continued to hunt it. This year, I'm staying out of the woods. I have concluded that we are invading their territory and it must cause them stress. I don't want to do that to these creatures. I've studied the phenomenon lately and learned quite a bit, and I think they are closer to humans than we think. This is not an average animal. So from now on, I'm going to be staying out of their habitat. Last year, on June the 2nd, I was riding into one of our base camps that we use for elk hunting. My younger brother and myself operate a guide service that we inherited from our father and his father before that. We lease out hundreds of thousands of acres in several states and don't have any need to advertise or ask for clients because we're now booked out for 5 years in advance. We have professional athletes, billionaires, actors, and politicians as clients. Any one of these clients will pay 6 digits for a record book bull elk. And I really don't want to give my name because it could be devastating to my business if it was discovered what I'm about to tell you.
All right, where you at,
The only
Fatso?
other person I've told was my brother, who I had to confide in. I arrived in the early afternoon after a pleasant 2-day ride on horseback. There are 2 ways into our camps, and that is horseback or helicopter, which we've had a couple of our clients opt to do. I crossed the bridge that my father and grandfather built over the fast-moving narrow river that was still flowing quick from the snow melt from the higher altitudes. I rode right into the makeshift corral with Dusty and the 2 pack mules. That only offered an illusion of containment because we wanted to give the horses a chance to run if a bear or cougar visited while we weren't around. We didn't worry much about the horses or mules running off because they were like big dogs rather than horses, and they would come back when we called them, and they wouldn't travel far away even if there was danger present. I quickly took inventory of the camp and raised the coolers off the ground as they had 2 weeks worth of food in them, and I didn't want the local bear population getting to feel comfortable visiting the camp, and I cooked up dinner and I turned in for the night. For the next 2 days, I began to scout the area for elk sign, but I didn't find so much as a hoof print even in the watering holes that the bulls love to dig up. Arriving back at the camp, I discovered my camp torn to bits and the coolers had been pulled down and emptied, only leaving a single pack of bacon and some bottles of frozen water. The mules didn't appear to be concerned whatsoever about the visitors, and in fact looked like someone had tried to braid their manes and tails. Well, to me, this trip was over, and I was going to head back to the truck the next day, but I decided that I would give this bear or people something to think about before I left in the morning. I was up before sunup and ready to investigate the crime of stealing my food, and I snuck off into the woods. I was able to track something for a distance and even found some of the wrappers from the meat that I had brought, but by noon the trail had gone cold, and I knew I had to get on the trail if I was going to make it back to the truck sometime tomorrow. I was being quiet as I approached the camp, and I could tell that something was amiss. At the edge, I could see something big and hairy in the corral with the horse, but they weren't excited like they were in danger. They were just standing there. This animal still had a winter coat on it. It was brown and it was 4 to 6 inches long. I reached down to my side and grabbed my lever action 12 gauge and loaded a staggered buckshot deer slug combination for protection from bears or cougars. The first shot would be buckshot, and it would tear up and knock it backwards, and then the slug would kill it, and I would repeat it over 2 times. I had it in my grip now, and I flipped off the safety with the most subtle click. But I was heard, and this animal began to raise up on its feet. It was in that moment that I realized that this creature was standing over 8 foot tall, and it wasn't a bear, it was a Sasquatch. Well, I was in shock as this thing turned toward me, and it smiled at me. But when I smiled back at it, I guess I must have done something wrong, because it leaned forward and it roared at me. Now, I have been roared at by grizzly bears and cougars quite
you
often,
never show a Sasquatch
but
your
none
teeth, bro.
that
It's
could
like a
match
gorilla.
the volume or the duration of the roar, even in the slightest. I snapped the gun up and was about to squeeze off the first shot when I was struck by another beast that was hiding just a couple of feet to my left. The force of the impact knocked me ass over ears through the air and into the river. Suddenly, I was being swept downstream in this cold water faster than you could dream, but I was glad to see how fast I was moving because I saw the 2 creatures running along the bank trying to catch up to me. I knew that I had been in the water over 20 minutes, and I knew that I needed to get out soon or I would freeze to death in this 60-degree water. I had not seen the creatures for some time now, but I decided to make my way to the other bank just to be safe. As I got to the bank, I realized that I was having trouble breathing, and my left arm was stiff. I decided to head back to the truck, which would take me 4 to 5 days on foot. And I was going to have to be really careful because I lost my phone and shotgun, and I only had the .40 caliber Ruger on my hip and 15 rounds. I had walked 2 hours and stopped to build a fire to dry the rest of the way before dark set in and the temperatures
What'd you build the fire
dropped.
with?
And I had managed to doze off when I heard that roar again off in the distance, and it was answered by other roars from different locations. There was no time to rest now. I had to go, but I was hurting, and I mean I was hurting, but I sucked it up and I started trotting off to the east. Anyone else would have been lost and running around in the darkness until sunrise when the sun popped over the horizon. But I've been hunting this area for the past 40 years and I knew it better than the ranchers that owned it.
I'm out of here, boys.
I continued to hear the roars that night and something breaking limbs against tree up until the sky began to lighten up. But I never stopped and I kept moving, and I only stopped a couple of times at some small lakes to take a drink of water. And I traveled well into the afternoon, and I stopped against a tree and I was asleep in seconds. I was jarred awake by thunder in the distance, and I wondered if those creatures were still following me, and I forced myself to my feet and I started making tracks again. It was after midnight when the storm had passed and everything finally quieted down, which was when I heard another roar,
I guess I have to fight.
and it was about half the distance away that I was the evening before. Well, this gave me motivation to push harder, and I picked up the pace, forcing myself to the extreme, knowing that if I didn't get out, they would be on me by morning. That night was the scariest 12 hours on the planet for me. The roars became more frequent and closer, and just a couple of hours before the sun popped up in the east, I started to get hit with rocks and sticks with amazing accuracy. I had no idea where they were being thrown from or how far away. So I kept going, afraid to stop, thinking I would be dinner or I'd be torn apart. But I refrained from reaching for my pistol because I believed that that was the trigger that set the attack off the other day, and I was hoping that they were just trying to push me out of their home range. I was relieved to see the sun crest the horizon that morning, and I knew it was about another 12 hours away from my truck. The good news was soon turned bitter, though, as I began to cough up blood. I realized now that I had a broken rib that must have punctured my lung, and I was bleeding internally, and doubt swept in. I began to think of my 2 boys at home and my lovely wife, and I was wondering if they would ever find me out here before the wolves or bears discovered my body. And then I became concerned about my brother, because he would surely come looking for me, and I wondered what was going to happen to him if the creature saw another human in their area. All this gave me more strength than I thought was possible for one human to have. And I was nearing the top of a ridge about 4 hours from the truck when I heard it. It was the sound of a truck nearby, and to my delight, I recognized it as one of the ranch trucks, but it was starting to pull away and my heart sank into my stomach. I grabbed my Ruger 40 cal and I started popping off rounds as fast as I could, and then everything went black. I woke up in the hospital in Denver, where I had been flown in by a helicopter after the ranch hands came to my rescue and called the medics. It was very expensive, but it was covered by a couple of our clients with deep pockets, which I'm extremely grateful to. My family was all there. They were excited to see me wake up. I had just been through an 8-hour surgery on top of everything else to remove part of my lung and one of my kidneys. Everyone had assumed that I had been thrown from my horse and hurt myself during the fall, but I knew better than to correct them and tell them what had really happened. I asked my brother to stay back as everyone left to get rest, and I told him the story about what really happened. I don't think he completely believed me, but he promised me that he would not go back to that site without several of our friends with him. 2 weeks later, my brother came back from recovering the mules and Dusty to tell me about what he had found. He said that the camp was completely destroyed along with the corral and the bridge. He found Dusty and the mules a short distance away, which came running when he called to them, and he also found huge footprints in the mud around the camp. And then the rocks started being thrown at them, and they fled the area, riding all night long to get back to the trucks and the trailer. Now he believes me. I wasn't physically able to guide last year. Now I wonder if I'll be able to guide mentally now. I decided to take on an apprentice to help me scout out other leases that we have, but I don't think we'll ever return to the bridge camp. Here is what I'm confused about. Why didn't they mess with the horses and the mules? And what did I do wrong to warrant the aggressive roar? I do understand that my reaction to that roar by pointing my shotgun at the creature was perceived as a threat.
Yeah, but
and
it was
that is
probably gonna kill you
probably
anyway.
what caused the second animal attack on me. I also believe that they could have caught me at any time that they would have desired, so I think they were just motivating me to leave as quickly as possible. And I also wonder if they had driven out all the local wildlife, because I never found any tracks of anything on that trip. Thanks for watching this podcast. If you thought it was good, make sure and come back for the next one I post, or go back through my library and listen to any of the 300 videos I already. Okay, this segment of the podcast, I had a gentleman send me an email, and he sent me a news clipping from a newspaper in East Texas. It's called the Polk County Enterprise, and I don't really know if me narrating these news articles is a copyright issue or not, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. And if anyone from the Polk County Enterprise has anything to say about it, they can email me, and if they have a problem with it, I'll take the video down. It's not a big deal. But this event was reported to happen in San Jacinto County. Here's the story. The story is written by Andrea Whitley, but the title of the story is Bigfoot Out and About in San Jacinto Amid COVID. COVID-19 has covered the front page of the newspapers across the country. It has, however, not stolen the thunder of one of San Jacinto County's most popular residents. Bigfoot. Yes, Bigfoot. Recently, I was contacted by a good friend who also happens to be a detective nearby. Normally, our conversations start out with basic information and facts revolving around a crime or crash, but not this time. I picked up my cell phone to answer his call, which came at approximately 2:30 a.m. And I answered, still halfway asleep, to hear my detective friend ask me what I was doing. Fishing. I was fishing, I quipped back with more sarcasm than I intended. What do you think I was doing? Is something wrong with you? Are you okay? Wait, did something happen to my kids? My mother, sister, or husband, or dog? I quickly did a brief checklist in my head to ensure myself that all was right in my world. Mom is at home, my sister is somewhere with her new boyfriend, and my children are asleep in my bed with me, which means my husband is somewhere in the house.
This is awesome.
After being booted out of our bed by the children, who although at 18 and 19 years of age insist on piling up in my bed because it's more comfortable. I glanced down at the floor, and there was my dog, and beside him was my husband, wrapped in my little pony blanket on the floor. Side note, I need to take a photo of him and the macho blanket he's covered with in case anyone should ever doubt his manliness. Okay, mental checklist done, and I caught my breath. No one had been hurt or died or required any type of medical attention. So what now? Why are you calling me this late? I asked. The story he relayed to me could best be described as, well, never mind. There's no description for something like this. Law enforcement officers have a special place in my heart, and I like the mind of an investigator. I like how they look at the facts. So I have
two of these, I guess.
I've always looked to the police officers and the FBI agents and investigators when I had things I could not make sense of. I have a deep respect for them most of the time. My hero officer began to tell me a story that if it was relayed to me by any other individual, I would not have believed. I will spare you the mundane details and I'll get right to it. Apparently, two men that are both high in authority within law enforcement circles decided to take a drive down some country back roads. It was a quiet night, and the two men just wanted to enjoy a brief reprieve from the bad guys before beginning their reports. Andrea, listen to me. You know me, right? He said. Yes, I replied. You know I always tell you the truth, right? Uh-huh, I replied. Note to self, this is not going to be good. When a police officer begins a conversation with you like the one above, it is never good. The Cliff Notes version of what happened is as follows.
I'm excited.
Decorated veteran officers looking for a peaceful ride in the country since there are no donut shops nearby. Decorated veteran officers grab a cup of coffee and pile into one of the unmarked SUVs and they hit the road. Officers hang a left turn off the main road and take a drive down a dirt road nearby. And as they make their way down the dirt road, traveling deeper into the thicket, the driver can see the form of what appears to be something crossing the road, and it was something big. My thoughts immediately went to whoever was crossing the road, the officer who was driving said. You don't have the luxury of thinking that the form was anything good once you've been in this business long enough. Immediately, my thoughts went to drugs or kidnapping, a robbery or worse. There was no reason that anyone should be out on that road at that time of night, and alone at that.
Sick.
With their radars and keen sense of danger now high on alert, the two men looked at each other, and without saying a word, they both began filing every detail of what they saw, heard, and felt into a mental lockbox. My partner and I have worked together for over 10 years, one officer told the San Jacinto News-Times. We know each other's actions and even expressions, and when I looked at my partner, I knew our evening was about to get crazy. And crazy is putting it mildly. As they approached the area, when they initially saw whoever or whatever it was crossing the road, the hairs on the back of their necks stood up. I call it FBC, or full body chills. The partner, who was in the passenger side, said, It's a sixth sense that we all have. It is a strange feeling of being on the edge and calculating every step and every move. It is scary, and if any member of law enforcement tells you that they don't get scared, then they do not need to be in this line of work.
Then they
because fear
lie.
keeps you alive. It had been only approximately 15 to 20 seconds prior when the men had witnessed what they described as a really tall man dart across the road into the wood line. As they got closer, there was no sign of anything or anyone. As both men began to take a collective deep breath of relief, their air was once again stolen when they stepped out of the SUV. I feel like I should give you a rundown of my education and training before I tell you what happened next. I have seen a lot in my time in law enforcement, as has my partner, he said. We have always been able to connect the dots and timeline of a crime or case based on evidence, and that's what we rely on. But in this case, I don't even know where or how to begin. The investigator sat across from me in a conference room at the station, and until this moment, they both had been at ease, maybe a little apprehensive, but nothing out of the ordinary. It was when they reached this point in their tale that everything changed. Both officers began to show unmistakable signs of anxiety and unrest. One began tapping his leg up and down rapidly. His face turned that shade of red that a person only gets when he or she is facing a frightening or an embarrassing situation. The second officer, who up until a moment ago was very relaxed, began clicking his pen up and down and eventually began to pace around the conference room. Just like police officers are taught to read body language, journalists like myself are trained in the same manner. It becomes second nature to rely on a person's actions rather than their words. And what I was witnessing in front of me was textbook fear and anxiety. Up until this moment, I had been relaxed, but as the officers began to tell me the rest of this story, I too began to fall victim to pen clicking and leg shaking. The seasoned officers began to tell me how, as they were getting back into the cab of their SUV, they both heard what can only be described as a primal scream. It gave me chills, and for me to get chills, that's saying something, one officer said. The two men explained that they began taking steps backward toward the pickup and heard the scream even louder. Being a career law enforcement officer, I knew no one was going to believe me, so I grabbed my phone and I hit record. And I was able to capture whatever the heck this thing was on audio as it screamed, he said. The officer allowed me to listen to whoever or whatever was making the sound. And as long as I have been in this business, there isn't a lot I haven't heard that I could not pinpoint the source. Well, make that journalist 0 something scarier than fiction 1. As we continued talking and trying to find a rational explanation of what could make that kind of sound, the officers continued their story. We had made it back to the vehicle, and by this time, we had one goal: get the heck out of there. We both climbed into our seats and were preparing to get out of Dodge when we heard that scream again. And this time it was louder, and it was closer, and it sounded as if it would shatter glass. I began to back up and turn around. The road we were traveling was narrow, and it took some skill for me to maneuver without ending up in a ditch. As I backed up and got us going in the right direction, I saw it. We saw it, the detective said. Both men agreed as they were trying to turn around and leave. The headlights of their vehicle shined on what can only be called a Sasquatch, or better known as Bigfoot. Yes, I know it sounds crazy, and if you print my name in this article, I'll have no choice but to call you a liar, the detective laughed uneasily. The partner, who had not said much up until this point, made eye contact with me and described the creature as being approximately 7 feet tall, with long arms and broad shoulders and strong. Doesn't sound too bad, that is until he proceeded with his description of the creature. He was hairy. He was covered from head to toe with dark grayish colored hair.
Interesting.
His features looked like they had been etched out with a chisel. He had a sharp jawline, and he was just so big. I've seen criminals, and I've seen gorillas, and I've seen everything in between, but I cannot say that I ever encountered anything like this before, explained the second officer. The two men both recall that one of the most fearful traits of the creature was that he had yellow eyes. His eyes just poured into you, one said. That's the only way I know to describe it. It took only seconds for the creature to disappear into the thick wilderness. He was there, and then he was gone, just like that. You would think something as large as this thing would not be able to move quickly, but he literally soared. I watched him take no more than 2 or 3 steps, and he was gone.
Dang it.
After hearing the officer's tale and listening to it again, I began to dig into a little history of San Jacinto County and its elusive primate. Over the past 70 years, I have come across numerous articles of residents who have come face to face with this creature. Although each collection differs slightly in detail, I am certain of one thing. San Jacinto County is home to some of the best people around, and it is also home to Bigfoot.
So close.
Doubt as you may, and I can completely understand the inclination to do so, it is my belief that there is something beyond the pines. I followed the facts, and I interviewed and re-interviewed witnesses, trying to come to a logical conclusion, and after hours of study and research, the only thing I can confirm with certainty is that San Jacinto County is home to something quite unusual. And then the editor's note reads, if you have experienced something out of the ordinary within the county, I would love to hear from you. Email editor at I'll put this into the description so you guys, if someone lives in San Jacinto County, you can email the editor of this publication. And if you've sent it to me, send it to them too, because apparently Andrea Whitney is onto something here. She really is interested in these strange stories. So the email address for the editor at the Polk County Enterprise will be in the description. Welcome to the Dixie Cryptid Podcast. Also, on the podcast network, we call this the What If It's True podcast. If you haven't found us on the podcast network, Whatever podcast app you use, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcast, Amazon, Audible, anybody that carries podcasts, do a search for What If It's True podcast, and we're right at the top of the list. You can follow along there, download all the episodes. I've been away for a while. I got real busy at work, and I just didn't feel like I could do work justice and do this podcast too. But I'm caught up now for a few days, and I'm back podcasting, and I'm so happy about it. All we do here is tell stories. If you like good stories, if you like to sit back and drive, sit around your kitchen table and eat supper and listen to stories, any way you like your story, we'll deliver it to you. If you like that kind of stuff, you found your people. Odd stories from real people just like you. Before we get going with the podcast, I want to let you know my buddies over at the Yeti Bar Soap Company have their Memorial Day sale going on right now. That means everything is 10% off. And when you check out, if you use the code DC10, you get an additional 10% off. Go over and check them out at YetiBars.net. They've got a new product now. It's a new stick of deodorant. I think it's called the Yeti Sour. Something about gummy bears. I'm not sure what that is. I'm going to have to check it out. YetiBars.net and Yeti Bars on Facebook. You got to give them a try. You won't be sorry. All right, let's roll on with this podcast. Thank you for joining me. All right, here we go.
And I ain't looking back to the hell where I come from.
Here's an email I received from a woman a while back. This is 2 secondhand stories that she heard that friends of hers told her, and I thought this was fascinating, so here we go. She writes, "Dear Cam, I'm a fan of your channel, and I have 2 stories for you. One is an alien abduction, and the other is a dogman sighting. Neither story is mine, but I know the people that witnessed these incidents. Story number 1, the alien abduction. This is Randy's story. Rest in peace, Randy. I'm representing you, dear friend. In 1998, I returned to my dusty little hometown in New Mexico for my 20-year high school reunion. And being in a little town, I ran into a dear friend of mine, Randy. It was great to see him, and he looked awesome. He was a short, blonde-headed, blue-eyed athlete who was always eager for a good joke and any activity that involved people. After 20 years, he hadn't changed a bit. The only difference in Randy was his eyes. He had a wide-awake look in his eyes that was almost too enthusiastic. Was he excited to see me? Maybe. Or was there something else? We decided to go for a drive together because in high school, that's what everyone did. We all got together and drove through the hills looking at different scenic landscapes and doing stupid things like rolling Dad's four-wheeler or burying our axle in a sandy wash. So there we were, like old times in 1978, parked on a bluff, overlooking the town and smoking pot. I had outgrown the pot thing, but I did partake in it just for the novelty and to prove to myself I hadn't become an old prude. I was buzzed and out of things to small talk about, and I made the comment, "Randy, are you nervous about seeing everyone at the reunion? I don't know why, but I'm nervous about it." "The reunion? That's nothing." He smiled and he laughed. "I'm completely relaxed around those people. There's nothing scary about those people at all." And then his face changed and he stared down at his arm. "You see that scar on my arm?" he asked. I looked at his forearm, and the scar on it was the size of a dime. It was round and irregular, like a small bullet wound. "I dug a shard out of my own arm with a pocket knife," he triumphantly said, pointing at the scar. "A shard? How did it get there?" I asked. "One day, Em and I were ditching school. We were just riding around out in the bluffs and smoking, and a spacecraft picked us up." "What the hell? An actual UFO picked you guys up?" I asked. My face was frozen in total shock at what I was hearing. "Yep," he said. "They picked us up in their spacecraft and they laid us out on a table. I was physically examined, and then they put these glass-like shards in my body.
That's crazy.
One was here in my arm, and the other one He turned his back to me and pointed at the base of his skull on the back of his neck. They put it in the base of my skull, he said. What did the shard look like? I asked. The one I dug out of my arm looked like glass. It was about the size of a grain of rice, but it was flat and kind of curved, he said, drawing an imaginary shard with his fingers. I really had to dig, too. It was embedded in my muscle close to the bone, but I was determined to dig it out, and I did. That thing bothered me. Looking out and recalling a memory, he continued. When I went into the Army, the doctors took the one out of my skull after they had to put me through a series of hypnosis sessions. Well, that's good, but how did they find out about it? Did you tell them? I asked. No, I went in for a physical, and the doctor asked me about the scar on my arm, and I told him what happened. And then I showed him the back of my neck where I thought the other one was, and he asked if I still had the shard, and I said, yeah.
The Siege of Canary Hill?
The Siege of Canary Hill, Part 1. The supply of jerky was almost gone. It had been a poor hunting season, and with the bulk of the winter still to come, rations were low. I would need to go to town. I didn't look forward to that. I rolled a strip of jerky and let it sit between my teeth and the inside of my cheek like a piece of hard candy. I had to make it last. Winter nights are long and cold this far north. On clear moonlit nights, the carpet of snow on the forest floor glows. Birch trees, wearing jackets of white, cast shadows as if under sunlight. The stars shine bright and turn on a wheel with the North Star at the center. It was not so the first night I encountered the creature. Weather came in from the south, and dark clouds lingered into the night and blacked out the moon and the stars. From the window of my cabin, halfway up the mountain and deep in the forest, the outside world was a deep black, and fading embers in the pot-belly stove cast a pale glow on the timber walls. I heard the drone of the engine first. It was a snowmobile. It's rare for anyone to come this far up the mountain, especially at night. You first have to cross the small lake between the forest and the town, which freezes each winter, and then thread a path uphill through the trees. It was bad enough under moonlight, let alone on a night like this, where the forest was an impenetrable black mass. Lights flickered through the window and were gone again. I rose from my bed and wiped away the condensation on the glass. Headlights cut through the darkness, and the engine rose and fell as the driver dodged the trees. The engine idled for a moment, and laughter and shouting filled the night air. The engine revved once more and drowned out the voices. "Kids," I said. Boxer raised his head at my voice and lowered it back to his bed of blankets. "Don't pay 'em any mind. They'll soon get tired of it and go back home. That or they'll make friends with a tree." The snowmobile droned on, sometimes quiet and far away, and sometimes loud and close by. With it, the laughing and shouting carried on, and I figured they were drunk and out joyriding. I could think of a long list of better things to do on a Saturday night, but that's how it is up north. You make entertainment with what you have at your disposal. There's not much to Canary Hill, and few people can pinpoint it on a map. If they've heard of it at all, they know little more than it's up north. Somewhere up there, isolated and frozen, and surrounded by jagged, snow-covered peaks. The town was built to support a now-defunct coal mine. Houses with weathered siding and flaking paint lined grids of dirt roads. The town might have died when the mine was shuttered, but instead, Canary Hill became a tourist destination. People come in the winter to see the northern lights or to take excursions by sled or snowmobile to the frozen lakes to fish for salmon, trout, and Arctic char. In the summer, they come to see the sun that never sets and the fishing. The old miners' huts in town are now bed and breakfasts, and new custom-built hotels with glass ceilings come with a $300 a night price tag.
Yeah.
The whine of the snowmobile heightened to a squeal, and Boxer gave a low growl and trotted to the cabin door. He thrust his snout to the small gap at the bottom of the door, and he sniffed. He took in the information on the air and turned his white head to me and growled once more. He scratched at the door with a paw and pleaded with blue eyes, common to the husky breed. "We aren't going out there. It's only kids," I said. Boxer's growl turned to a high-pitched whine. Boxer fell silent, and so did the night. The snowmobile engine and no voices. And then came a scream. It was a high-pitched scream lasting a few seconds, followed by shouting. I rose from my bed and went to the window. Snowmobile headlights pointed away from my cabin, but the machine was still. Figures wearing bright puffed jackets moved in the lights, and one fell in the snow. And then there was another scream. I took my jacket off the hook and put on my boots and slung my rifle over my shoulder. And I grabbed my old miner's helmet with the light mounted to the top and pressed it down over my woolen hat. Boxer was ready at the door, and I thrust it open. The cold was a slap in the face, but the night was still. The snowmobile was close, and I trotted out to it, boots crunching in the snow. One track of the snowmobile propped against a mound of snow at the base of a tree, and the nose was dug in and half buried. The engine was off and the occupants had left. 2 beer bottles lay discarded by a tree. Multiple sets of footprints made a confused circle beside the snowmobile, and then they led out into the darkness. Boxer ambled ahead, sniffing at the ground, and I followed Boxer in the tracks, and I called out. The answer came in a muffled cry to my right and down the slope. A small light bobbed in the darkness. Someone was running, using a phone for a torch. I shone my torch in their direction, and Boxer ran on ahead, following the beam of light. A girl with dark hair and a red puffer jacket appeared, her hair caked in snow and her eyes wide. Her skin was pale in the torchlight.
She's
"Come
freaking
quick,"
hot.
she said. "Something is out there." Her words came in fits of short breaths. Well, I knew the girl. Her name was Talia. She turned and ran back into the forest, retracing her footsteps in the snow, and I ran after her, the light on my helmet lighting her way. Boxer ran ahead, slowing on occasion to sniff at the ground, and he stopped and turned a circle and looked back and waited. Beside Boxer, a boy lay on his back. He held his head with one hand, and blood spilled from his nose, forming a pool of dark red in the snow. The boy mumbled something, but I couldn't make it out. Boxer had no interest in the bleeding boy, and he barked out into the darkness. "It's trying to take him," Talia said. "Trying to take who?" I said. "Stephen! Stephen is out there!" "What is it, a bear?" I thought it unlikely. We did get bears, but it was too late in the winter for them to be out roaming in the night. "I don't know," she said. I shined the light in the direction Boxer was facing, and I caught a glimpse of a person ahead. I took my rifle in my hands and edged forward, and Boxer followed at my heels. I kept the light on the figure. It was a kid standing out in the snow. A strange warmth grew as we neared. It was as if a fire burned somewhere, but I saw no flame, and I crept through the snow, making as little noise as possible. The kid was close now. It was a boy in a dark gray jacket facing into the darkness ahead. He turned his head and looked up into the light of the torch. His face was shrouded in darkness as if he wore a black hood. From the top of his head, a strip of black about the diameter of a forearm stretched out and snaked its way into the dark of the woods beyond. The black strip writhed and jerked in the still night air.
This is creepy.
"It wants me to go with it," the boy said. He expelled puffs of black smoke from his mouth as he spoke. I focused the torch on the head of the boy and saw dozens of thinner black cords, as if an octopus had wrapped its tentacles around him. The tentacles pulsed and slithered and held the boy fast. One disappeared up each nostril, and several entered his open mouth and hissed like air releasing from a tire as they injected black smoke into him. The left eye of the boy was visible and reflected back the torchlight. "You're okay," I said. "Why don't you come with me?" And I held out my hand to the boy. "It wants me to go. I want to go. I won't let you stop me," he said. The boy turned his body to face me and he started to walk. I lowered my rifle. "That's it," I said. The boy reached out and gripped the rifle and tried to wrestle it from me, and I closed both hands on the rifle and gave the boy a shove with my forearm. He staggered back a few steps and then he came at me, and I raised my rifle. "Stop right there," I said. The boy didn't stop, and Boxer began barking. I backed up a couple of steps, and the trees rustled behind the boy. The warmth I had felt turned to a wave of heat. It was like standing beside a roaring bonfire, and yet there was still no flame. Two glowing orbs appeared from behind the tree. I turned my torso to point the torch into the trees behind the boy, and I caught the edge of a black mass partially concealed behind a tree. Something was there. I stumbled back and fell into the snow, and the boy turned and walked to the creature hiding in the trees. It extended a limb, and a set of long fingers wrapped around the torso of the boy, and in a single motion pulled the boy up off his feet. The black tentacles circling the head of the boy released their grip and revealed eyes full of fear and a wide smile that showed all the boy's teeth. And then, with a flourish that left the branches swaying, the creature and the boy were gone. My heart thumped like a cannon in my chest, and I manipulated the torch to where the thing had been, but there was only forest and snow. The heat I had felt was gone, replaced with the cold of the night, and behind me Talia screamed. I edged forward to see where the black creature had been, but there was nothing there. "Where did he go?" she said. "Quiet," I said. Boxer sniffed and I listened. There was nothing. I swung the torch around, but I caught nothing, and on the ground a ring of green forest floor was visible where the creature had stood. It had melted the snow, and I smelled something burning. I trained the torch on the tree trunk the creature hid behind and found black char marks on the bark. And adjacent trees also bore black marks, and then the trail stopped. I slung my rifle over my shoulder and ripped off my glove, and I ran my hand over the tree, and it was warm to the touch. "Where did it go?" I said. I swung the torch in a circle, searching for charred trees or footprints in the snow. A trail of melted snow led deep into the forest, and I followed it, part hoping I would find the boy and part hoping I would not find what had taken him. I came to an exposed ledge of rock. The trail disappeared. And in the dark of the night, I could not see where or if the trail continued beyond, and I retraced my steps. Talia was on her knees in the snow. Her head was in her hands. The boy with the bloodied nose was behind her, standing now but bent over, his hands on his thighs. The stream of blood from his nose had slowed to a drip. "What the hell was that?" I said. "I don't know," Talia said. "Tell me everything that happened." Talia dropped her hands. She turned to her friend and then back to me. "We were just out riding in the snow, and we thought we saw lights out in the forest. And we stopped, and Stephen went out to look. And we heard him scream, and we went to him, but it had him. And we tried to help. I think he broke my nose," the boy said. Light snow began to fall. I placed a hand on Talia's jacket to help her up, and her friend stepped across and slapped my arm away. He eyed me as he lifted Talia to her feet. "We have to go after him," Talia said. "He's gone," I said. "Wherever he is, we won't find him in the dark. One of you should call the chief." Part 2. The interrogation room at the police station was not new to me. At the end of the summer, a local man by the name of Lee Rutowski had gone out hunting and never came home. He told his wife he planned to head into the woods not far from where my cabin is, so it was no surprise when they hauled me in, but I had not seen or heard Rutowski, and they never found the body. The chief of police is a man named Sam Fingleton, known around town as Chief. The rest of the town was on a first-name basis with each other, including Fingleton's deputies. But such was the standing Fingleton held in the town. Everyone knew him only as Chief. Some residents would be hard-pressed to tell you his first name. Not that there was ever much policing to do. The odd drunken brawl on a Friday night, and those were rare since the coal mine shut down. Fingleton is a tall, thin man with glasses and a receding hairline. He could pass for a banker or a lawyer, but he had a hard edge to him, and you had a front row seat if you ever found yourself on the wrong side of the law in Canary Hill. Fingleton stood in the corner with crossed arms while one of his deputies, a pale, stout man named Jim Elliott, took my statement. I had shown the police where the boy stood and where the creature had been, and I'd shown them the charred trees, which I could not find an explanation for. They started their search in the night, went on into the day, and then they hauled me in. I find it strange, Fingleton said. What's that? I said. All this happened up by your cabin. You're the only one living out in the forest. There's no one else on that mountain, and it's right there this boy goes missing. It's quite coincidence, wouldn't you say? I didn't invite them over, I said. Then why did they go up there? He asked. Why don't you ask them? Why is no one giving me a straight answer? There's a boy missing, and all I'm getting is some sort of story about black monsters spewing smoke. Why don't you tell me what happened and this time cut the shit? I told you what happened. The kids will tell you the same thing. Except I don't believe in fairy tale monsters. I've been doing this a long time, and every monster I've ever encountered has been a human. I want you to level with me, Walker. Everything that goes on up in those woods is not on me because I live up there. And if I was going to come up with a story, I'd think of something better than monsters in the woods. Hell, I'd blame it on a bear. I know how this sounds. Well, do you think it might have been a bear? Elliot said. Bears don't move like that, nor do they melt the snow where they stand, and nor do they char tree trunks when they walk by them. We looked in the woods, Fingleton said. We didn't find any bear or any creature that abducts teenagers. I'm just telling you what I saw, I said. I had to knock on the door of that kid's house today. The boy was Mark Potter's son, Stephen. Mark and Jude are real cut up about him going missing, said the chief. I didn't know it was Potter's kid, I said. If the boy's still alive somewhere, we need to get to him today and before it gets dark again, or he won't survive out in the cold, said Fingleton. I don't suspect he would. If I knew where he was, I'd tell you. I got nothing against him, but I don't know where he went, so if you don't have anything else, I'd rather be on my way. I need to get back home before dark. The forest is no place to be wandering around after the sun goes down, I said. If there's something out there, Elliot said, you still fancy being alone in your cabin with this thing running around? That cabin is my home, and this thing being out there doesn't change that. Fingleton sighed. Sign your statement and get out of here. My team will be poking around out there again at first light, so try not to shoot us. Don't go making any trips south. We may want to talk to you again. I don't have plans to travel, I said. Elliot had tethered Boxer to a pole out front, and I untied the leash and was on my way. I didn't have a car, never had much use for one after I moved up into the woods, so I had to make the trip by foot. It was 2 minutes to the lookout at the edge of the town, and after a scramble down the slope and onto the lake, it was another 20 minutes to the tree line. The walk took longer in the summer when the ice melted and I had to walk around the lake instead of straight across. But from the tree line, it was still a hike up the slope to a clearing in my cabin. I had 2 hours until dark. There was no time to waste. The lake was empty in the faded light of the afternoon. Anyone who might have been ice fishing had long since gone home. Up on the hill, where the access track cut into the forest, the police were packing up for the night.
Get up right here.
They would need to wait until morning to resume the search for the missing boy. I had almost reached the tree line when 2 flashlights flickered through the trees. Coming the other way were 2 men on foot. Mark Potter was one, a large man whose cheeks were always red, who always wore the same trucker hat, even in the cold of the winter. The other man was George Visser. He was on my crew at the mine before it closed. We buddied up when he started at the mine, and he had been easy to teach. George had a bout of lung trouble and now got a pension from the government. We had a falling out years ago, and we no longer spoke. George had a wife who had died of cancer shortly after giving birth to Talia, the girl who had been on the mountain the night before. Potter spotted me and made a beeline through the trees and out onto the lake. He puffed out his chest and quickened his step as he neared me. "What were you doing out there, Walker? I saw you get taken away by the police," Potter said. "I didn't have anything to do with it. I was just there," I said. "You saw what happened?" "I saw your boy get taken." "Get taken by what?" Potter's voice cracked on the last word. "I don't know what it was," I said. "What were you doing there, hanging out with the kids?" "They came my way. I didn't go theirs. I'm sorry about your boy." "I don't need your sympathy. I need my boy back. Where did it take him?" "I followed the tracks up the mountain, but I couldn't find him. It's too dark. I'm sorry." I tugged at Boxer's leash and walked around the 2 men. "Your old friend George here tells me what a kook you are, hiding away up in the woods all on your own." I stopped and looked back at George, who avoided my gaze and looked at his own feet. And Potter continued, "If you had anything to do with this, I'm going to come up there and give you what's coming." "I have to get home. It's getting dark," I said. The route I normally took to the cabin went right by where the creature took the boy, and I veered off a little to avoid it. It wasn't so much a conscious decision, but the way my feet took me. I had spent much of my life in the forest, and I knew to be vigilant. There was always the risk of bears or a bad fall. I knew the risks, but I had never been truly afraid. As I crossed the tree line, my steps slowed and my eyes darted from side to side. Boxer, who was now off leash, kept close by my side. Dark clouds hung in the air and the light was fading fast. And I knew the way, but in the twilight the shadows turned the forest dark and my pulse quickened. My mind played back the glimpse of the creature, black and waiting to pounce. The boy stood helpless as it grabbed him and took him away. My walk turned to a trot, and Boxer kept pace. It was almost dark when I reached the cabin. The structure emerging from the woods filled me with relief. I stepped through the last of the trees and stopped dead. Boxer stopped with me, and he raised his snout and sniffed. Thick streaks of black covered the timber wall panels of the cabin. It was as if someone had taken a wide paintbrush and smeared black paint all over the walls. I thought back to the charred tree trunks.
I love this
The creature had been here. I knew there was something out in the forest, and I had seen it, but in the station, telling the story to the authorities had made it somehow distant. I let myself believe that I would be safe in the small parcel I occupied, that whatever this thing was, it would leave me alone if I left it alone. The creature had not accepted that bargain. The safety of my cabin was now anything but. A strengthening breeze rustled through the trees, and I crept to the cabin. I took off one glove and put my hand on the char mark. It was cold. The creature had been here, but it was some time ago. I jammed the key in the lock and shouldered open the door, and in the last of the light, I searched for any movement from within the single room. and nothing moved. I hauled some firewood inside and closed the door behind me, and I locked it, and I lit a fire in the potbelly stove in the middle of the room. And the cabin was cold, and I held my hands out for warmth. I put on a pan of beans and boiled some tea. I didn't feel much like eating, but I was tired and the food would do me good. There would be no sleep tonight. The creature could come back, and if it did, I had to be ready. I took a rifle from the shelf and propped myself on the bed and set the rifle across my lap. And Boxer turned a small circle beside the bed, and I tapped on the foot of the bed, and he jumped up and nestled against my leg. I never let him on that bed, but I let the rule slide this once. I considered hiking back to town, but outside it was dark and the clouds thickened and all the external light was gone. There was no way I wanted to make the journey back to town now. Even with a flashlight, the forest had too many hiding places. Maybe if the night was clear and there was a full moon, but the sky was ink black. So I would wait. I would wait all night with my rifle and Boxer by my side. I would wait for the creature to come and bang at the door. Boxer whined and stirred me from a shallow sleep. He was off the bed and sniffing at the small gap at the base of the door. A dull light came in through a single window on the eastern wall of the cabin. The sun was up, but the clouds were thick and dark in the sky. Light snow made a gentle patter against the glass window. The trees swayed in the wind, and ominous clouds suggested it would get worse.
Suck.
I unlocked the door and inched it open. Boxer thrust his snout into the growing gap and
We're all
pushed
dead.
until it was wide enough for him to pass. He scurried out and disappeared around the corner. Moments later, he barked, and I ran to the rear of the cabin. My rifle was raised. "Who's there?" I yelled. Boxer was still barking at the trees. I searched for the signs of movement, and I heard some rustling to my left. I swung the barrel of my rifle, and there was George Visser, his arms raised. "Don't shoot," George said. "What are you doing there?" I said. "We're looking for my boy." Mark Potter stepped out from behind a tree, a rifle of his own raised and pointed in my direction. "To the right. Your boy isn't here." Potter moved forward, rifle still pointed. "He won't let anything in there but me." Boxer lowered his head and growled. "Call your—" "I'm asking you. Let me look at—" punctuated Boxer's growling. I put my hand on him and told him to heel, and his body vibrated as he continued. I slung my rifle over my shoulder and took one step to the left. And Potter lowered his shoulders and dropped the barrel of his rifle, but he kept his finger on the trigger. "Keep your dog off of me." I told him no. It's up to him if he listens, I said. Potter crept to the window, stealing glances at Boxer every other step, and then peered inside. The cabin was small and there wasn't much to see. A bed pushed against the western wall and shelves holding pots and pans and rice and lamps and hunting and fishing gear stacked in a corner by the door. "Your boy isn't here," I said. "What have you done with him?" Potter raised his rifle and pointed it at me again. "If you're going to shoot me, get on with it. Otherwise, get on your way," I said. "You know, the kids in town have a running bet. Anyone who comes up here and gets through the trees and into this clearing wins $100, said Potter. "Is that so?"
Dude.
I said. "The people in town tell stories about you, Mr. Frontiersman, Mr. Wild Man. Long beard and long hair and the stink of a man who hasn't washed in months. Living up here all alone isn't normal," said Potter. "I like it better than sharing a town with people like you," I said. "Maybe the loneliness and the silence and the trees got to you. Maybe some kids came up here to your cabin and things got out of hand." Potter dropped his rifle and ran his hand over the char marks on the cabin walls. "What the hell happened here?" "Potter, look!" The cry came from the edge of the trees, from George Visser, who had not moved since I'd first seen him. He pointed up above the trees, eyes wide and mouth open. I followed the raised arm and hovered above the trees was a long black cord like a giant snake. It was stationary, unmoved by the wind. Boxer started barking once more, and I quieted him. The black snake moved now, coming toward us, maintaining its height above the trees. It stopped directly above George. At the tip of the snake, a series of smaller tentacles fanned out like fingers. The tentacles pulsed and hissed and ejected black smoke. The snake dropped, and the tentacles at the tip wrapped around the head of George Visser. For a moment, George was still, his head raised slightly like he was trying to smell something on the wind. His chest expanded and contracted, and he shook. And then he turned and marched in a line made by the black snake, as if it were a fishing line and he was being reeled in. "What's happening, George?" Potter said. George said nothing in response. Potter ran to his friend and shot out an arm and grabbed at George's jacket, swinging him around. George swatted the hand away and landed a gloved fist on Potter's temple, dropping him to the ground. Potter winced and rubbed his head. He looked to me with wide eyes and then back to his friend, who walked into the trees.
This is a
Potter
sweet
stumbled
primary.
to his feet and he rushed at George, kicking up snow as he went. Potter overtook his friend and blocked his path. He stood like a statue between George and the trees, and he held up a hand. "Stop," Potter said. George paused and took the rifle slung over his shoulder, and he shot Potter through his head. The crack from the gun echoed off the trees, and somewhere a bird cried and took flight. Mark Potter crumpled to the ground and lay lifeless. Blood poured from his forehead onto the snow. George lowered his rifle and stepped over the body and walked into the woods, led by the black snake, which had not loosened its grip. Boxer jumped forward, an apprehensive first couple of steps toward the body of Potter, before stopping and turning back to me. I woke from my stupor and went into the trees after George with my rifle raised. It was not a black snake. It was part of the creature, the same thing that had taken the boy. It must be a limb or a tail, but whatever it was, I knew the creature would be at the end of it, and when Visser got there, it would take him. I followed George's tracks in the snow deep into the forest. Ahead, I saw a rifle laying in the snow. George had discarded it, and there I stopped. I couldn't see anything but the trees, and the only sound was the wind. Boxer sniffed at my feet, but refused to go on. I smelled something on the air, something familiar that I couldn't put a finger on. I crept forward, eyes darting between the tracks in the snow and the trees where the creature might be hiding, and then I saw him through the trees. George stood before the beast. The creature had the shape of a wolf. Everything was monotone grays and black, except two red orbs for eyes. It was taller than a wolf should be, closer to that of a horse. The creature stood on thick legs, ending in large flat paws with claws extending out like human fingers. A long tail sprung from a thick hindquarter and ended in the tentacles wrapped around George's head. I aimed my rifle at the creature. Like a lion pouncing on a gazelle, it leapt at George, its paws leaving the ground, stretching out and embracing him. The creature moved fast for a beast its size, and when it embraced George, it swallowed him into the darkness, and he was gone. The creature turned and retreated into the forest. I was breathless. It didn't look real, but imaginary things don't take people away. A demon might drag you away in your sleep, but then you wake in your bed. I stood helpless, rifle raised, having not fired a shot, staring into the empty forest where George had been only moments before. I crept to where the creature had been. There were char marks on the trees. A patch of melted snow where it had stood. Tracks of melted snow led into the forest. The creature was gone, and so was George. Like the boy Stephen, the creature had taken him. There was shouting off to my right, and I heard the rushed footsteps of people running through the woods. I turned with my rifle and I heard the voice of Chief Fingleton. "Drop your weapon," he said. I lowered my rifle to the ground and raised my hands in the air. And Fingleton closed in on me. "Was that you shooting?" "Did you see it?" I said. "Did I see what?" said Fingleton. "George is gone. It went that way." Fingleton, now beside me, kicked my rifle away and put his body between me and my weapon. "What have you done with him?" he said. A second set of footsteps came bounding down from behind me. It was the deputy, Elliot. "Mark Potter's been shot. He's dead." "Get down on your knees, hands above your head," Fingleton shouted. I complied, and then my face was in the snow, and there were knees on my back, and my hands were in cuffs. "You need to go after it," I said. "It took George." Fingleton was not in the mood to listen. He hauled me up and took me back to town. Back now at the police station, I explained what happened, but it wasn't much use. Fingleton wasn't buying it. It didn't help that George's rifle, make and model, matched my own. It would take some time to determine which gun fired the bullet that destroyed Mark Potter's brain. And even when it did come, it wouldn't put the matter to bed. They could say I overpowered George and used it against Potter. For what reason would George have shot his friend? Chief Fingleton carried a look of satisfaction when he dismissed my version of events. When he woke that morning, he had a mystery that he could not solve. There was a missing boy and a fanciful story from a recluse and a couple of teenagers who had been drinking. I saw a weight lifted as he questioned my story and substituted it with his own version of events. Potter and Visser had come up to my cabin and there had been an argument. It was no secret there was bad blood between George and I. I had overpowered George and I shot Potter. And then I had done God knows what to George. It was logical and explained everything, and it made it almost certain I had also disposed of Potter's boy Stephen the day before. Fingleton and Elliot demanded that I tell them what I had done with George, but I could only tell them that the creature had taken him. It was a dark, wolf-like animal hunting in the forest, and I told them to go look at my cabin in the trees where they'd arrested me, and they could see the charring. I told them to follow the tracks in the snow while they still could. It made no difference. They kept me for a couple of hours trying to get a confession, but they gave up and took me to the holding cell. The holding cell is at the back of the station. 3 concrete walls and steel bars on the 4th. There's a toilet and a sink and a single bed in a corner and a single small window above the bed. The holding cell was used for drunks who hadn't known when to say when and had ended up in a bar fight. Elliot thrust me into the cell and closed the steel gate behind me, and a set of keys jangled and the lock engaged. I turned to Elliot. He smiled, satisfied with his day of police work. There were still 2 missing bodies out there somewhere, but they would be found or I would crack and tell them where they were. At least that's what they thought. "What did you do with Boxer?" I asked. "He wouldn't come. Last I saw, he was sulking around that cabin of yours. We got no intention of going to get him either. If he doesn't want to come, it's on him." "Let me ask you something," I said. "What is it?" Elliot said. "Lee Rutkowski, the hunter who went missing. What about him? You never found his body, did you? But did you find any charred trees while you were looking?" I asked. The smile left Elliot's face. He clenched his teeth. "We found whatever you left for us to find." Elliot clipped the keys to his belt and he left. The cell was cold, and outside it was getting dark. I lay down on the bed and kicked off my boots. I hoped sleep would come. Tonight, I was in the safest place in Canary Hill. I only wished Boxer was with me. I thought of him out there in the dark and hoped that he was safe.
Yeah, this is make it creepy.
Part 3. 2 things happened resulting in my release from prison. The first was the analysis of the bullet retrieved from Mark Potter's brain. Now the police knew it had come from George's rifle. The second was the creature taking another person, and this time there were witnesses to the event. Diana Fawns worked at the supermarket in town and lived with her husband Lewis in a small house fronting onto the lake at the edge of town. As Lewis told it, he found himself outside in the dead of the night, torch in mouth and desperately trying to get the pilot light on their heating system to ignite. Diana had awoken in a bedroom that was an icebox, and she nudged her husband, who despite the cold was dead asleep. While Lewis worked, Diana provided moral support on the porch, rugged up against the cold. Lewis's fingers numbed as he tried and failed to get a spark from the lighter. He rubbed the end of the lighter against the inside of his jacket, and he tried again, and this time produced a flame, and he used it to get the pilot light going. He turned the temperature dial, and the heating system roared back to life. Diana went back inside. Lewis closed the cover on the heater and switched off the torch and trotted to the front porch. He blew warm air into his hands and rubbed them together. He climbed the steps to the porch and kicked his boots against the railing and shook off the snow. At the door he stopped. There was a strange black cord about the diameter of his arm in the top corner of the doorway. The cord came from the darkness, and he followed it backward to find its source, but the night was dark and it disappeared beyond the reach of the porch light. Lewis entered the house. The cord snaked its way around to the left and disappeared into the kitchen, oscillating like a garden hose full of water as it went. Lewis reached out a hand to touch it, and that's when he heard his wife call out. He went to the kitchen and found his wife standing by the sink with black tentacles wrapped around her head. He described it as if there were a black beehive covering her head. Lewis rushed to Diana and put his hand on her shoulders. He spoke to her, but she didn't respond. She was not in pain. She didn't seem scared. He could not make out her expression, but her body was calm. And then she spoke. "It wants me to come." "What does?" said Lewis.
Sorry.
"I have to go now," she said.
I'm such a child.
Diana turned and Lewis loosened his grip. She walked toward the door of the kitchen, and Lewis put himself in the doorway and blocked his wife from exiting. Diana, denied access to the door by her husband, turned and took the biggest knife from the rack on the bench next to the stovetop. She turned back to her husband and buried the knife into his thigh. Lewis fell to the floor screaming. He pulled the knife out of his leg and the blood started to flow, first in drips and then with a rush. He limped to the bathroom and took a towel and tied it around the wound as tight as he could. In the house next door, which was up the hill, the screaming woke a 20-year-old university student named Merrick. Merrick was lodging in Canary Hill as part of a study taking measurements of the permafrost for a research project. He put on his jacket and boots and ran down the hill to the house. He knew Lewis and Diana, and they had dined together on many occasions. This made for a welcome change for Merrick, who could not identify a single neighbor by name. Merrick came in through the open door and followed the trail of blood to the bathroom where Lewis clutched at a blood-soaked towel on his leg. Lewis asked about his wife, but Merrick had not seen her. Merrick lifted the injured man to his feet and helped him to his car and got behind the wheel. "Where are you taking me?" Lewis said. "I have to get you to the hospital," said Merrick. "No, we have to go find Diana. She walked right out into the night." They drove the streets of Canary Hill looking for Diana. After a few trips around town without seeing his wife, Lewis remembered the disappearances in the forest and instructed Merrick to take the road in that direction. They skirted the edge of the frozen lake, and as the trees came into view, they spotted her. Diana Fawns, in her white nightgown, no shoes, no jacket, in the dark and cold, and heading for the woods. The car came to a stop as Diana made it to the tree line. The two men exited the vehicle and they called out to her. The headlights penetrated the woods and the two men followed Diana, and that's where they saw it. There was a creature out there, but it reflected no light, and it was a dull black mass. They couldn't see what it was, and they guessed it might have been a bear, but had no explanation for why the headlights didn't illuminate it. Diana stopped before the creature and raised her head. The black tentacles still wrapped around her head and the cord leading from the tentacles into the forest and to the creature. Lewis limped toward his wife, calling at her to come back to him. In a flash, the creature pounced and Diana Fawns disappeared. There was a rustle in the trees, and in a moment, the creature was gone. Lewis had seen bears before, but this was no bear. He couldn't say what it was. Elliot came to release me from the cell. He was pale and he bore the face of a defeated man. The night before, he had likely slept comfortably, safe in a world where everything made sense and problems had known solutions. And now he and Chief Fingleton had a problem they couldn't explain. An unknown creature was on the loose and killing residents of their town. There was no procedure for this. Chief wants to see you before you go, Elliot said. Chief Fingleton was in no better mood than Elliot. He waved me into his office as he put the telephone down at his desk. I sat and Fingleton tipped his upper body forward and leaned on his elbows and rested his mouth on his closed fists. He stared at the empty desk between us. It took a few moments before he raised his eyes to mine. I can't let you go back up there, he said. To my cabin? You can't stop me from going on my property, I said. I can, and I am. We issued the permit for your home up there, and we are rescinding it temporarily. Those woods are now off limits to all civilians. Someone else got taken, am I right? I asked. Last night, Diana Fawns. He ran me through the details. Well, where am I going to go? And what about Boxer? I asked. We found Boxer at the front door of the station this morning. We tied him up outside. I have you a room at the Canary Motel. There'll be no charge. Go down and talk to Marion at the desk. She's expecting you.
Oh, yeah,
you can't do this, I said. I just did it. You go anywhere near the forest and I'll arrest you. I've got bigger problems, so I'm asking for your cooperation. Fingleton placed his palms on the desk. I apologize for holding you all night. When can I go back up there? I asked. After we've dealt with it, he said. What are you going to do? I asked. Fingleton paused. There's weather coming in. When it clears, backup is coming from the south, and we'll go up there and take care of it. You don't even know what you're dealing with, I told him.
Oh, please don't.
That's my problem to solve. Take Boxer to the motel and stay there. I've called a town meeting tonight at the hall. Come along if you want. There are a lot of people with a lot of questions.
What was that?
Fingleton swiveled in his chair and he sighed and stared at the wall of his office. He waved me away with his hand and I left him with his thoughts. Boxer was curled up outside the front door and he raised his head and he nuzzled his snout against my leg. He was tired.
Oh, yeah, you're dead.
We walked together down the street, empty of people and
Dead.
cars. At the crossroad, a cold wind hit me. The street signs swayed and dark clouds stretched across the sky. Fingleton was right. There was weather coming. Marion gave me 2 keys, one for my room and one for a small laundry room at the end where Boxer was to stay. The no pets policy had no exceptions. Marion gave me a bowl and a blanket, and I spread the blanket beside the bank of washers and dryers, and I sat with Boxer. The room was cold, and the glass door rattled in the wind, and then it started to snow. The weather brought the dark early.
This could be useful.
And I dozed and woke with a start at the sound of a tree branch breaking and falling to the ground. I checked the time by the clock on the wall, its face illuminated by the lights from the electronic coin slots on the machines. I left Boxer sleeping, and I went out into the snow. The meeting was already underway when I entered the hall. Around 30 of the residents of the town were in fold-up chairs facing the front. Fingleton stood behind a podium flanked by Elliot. A few heads turned to me when I entered and lingered before turning back to Fingleton. I stood in the back rather than take a chair. May McKenna, who owned and ran a small cafe in town called the Blue and White, stood among the seated townspeople. She spoke into a microphone. "Chief, can you tell us what is going on? Everyone I talk to has a different story of what's happening out there in the forest." "It seems," Fingleton answered, "there is some animal out in the forest, and that's why there's a temporary ban on access. No one is to enter the forest until further notice." "Well, are we safe in town?" asked May. "We don't yet have any report of this animal being seen outside the forest," Fingleton said. "Then how did it get Diana Fawn's? I heard she was at home when it came." "The Fawn's house is adjacent to the forest," said Fingleton. "But their house isn't in the forest. How far has it come?" she asked. "We don't know," said Fingleton. "What happens if it gets you? Diana put a knife in Lewis's leg, and then she walked out into the forest in the freezing cold without her coat in the middle of the night. We also have reason to believe the animal breathed a form of poison or toxin that has an effect on the victim's behavior. So we're not safe in our homes, and we're not safe around anyone who comes into contact with this thing?" she asked with a hopeless tone. "Our advice is to stay indoors. Keep your windows and doors shut and sealed as best as you can," said Fingleton. "How many of these things are out there?" another woman asked from the audience. "Only one has been seen at any one time. There could be more than one. We don't know at this time." Fingleton was feeling the frustration of the moment. "Well, what do you know?" a man from the back of the room asked. "There is something out there," a small voice from the corner of the room. All the heads in the hall turned. It was Janine Ratowski, whose husband had gone out hunting and never come home. "You knew there was something out there when Lee never came home, and you did nothing." "What are you going to do?" May McKenna shouted into the microphone. Fingleton paused. "We have requested assistance from down south, but unfortunately the weather down there is worse than it is here. We've been told the Stewart Bridge is impassable. They need to wait until the weather clears." "Well, when is that going to be?" May spoke above the murmuring of the residents. "It'll be Monday at the earliest, but maybe even a week," said Fingleton. "If you had raised the alarm as soon as it took the kid, we would have the cavalry up here right now," another male voice echoed in the open space. "What's done cannot be changed," said Fingleton. "I'm leaving." May put the microphone back into the stand. "I'm not waiting." Fingleton held up his hands. "Our information is that the roads are impassable in this weather. The storm is coming. It'll get worse before it gets better. If you drive south now, you're likely to be stranded. This is no weather to be out traveling." The murmur in the audience rose to shouting and finger-pointing, and Fingleton lowered his eyes to the floor and held up his hands. May had taken several steps away from the microphone and toward the door. She turned back. "Your job is to protect us. What are you doing now? We can't go anywhere, and so we're sitting ducks, and you're going to sit behind your desk and wait for us to get taken? How are we supposed to be okay with that?" Fingleton pushed back from the podium and stared at his feet. He closed his eyes and shook his head, and after what felt like an hour, he came back to the microphone. "At first light tomorrow, Deputy Elliot and I are going into the forest to find this thing. We're going to find it and kill it." Well, Elliot snapped his head to Chief Fingleton. This had not been the plan. They were supposed to wait for backup. He looked like he would be sick. "And what if it comes tonight?" asked May. "Call the station immediately," said Fingleton. "What if you can't find it? Or what if you can and it does to you what it did to the others?" another female citizen asked. "I'm coming with you." It was the voice of a girl. Talia stood in the front corner of the room. Her head barely rose above those seated around her. The wild hair and the wide eyes from the night on the mountain was now a braided ponytail and a resolute stare. Talia, no, Fingleton said. Why not? I've seen this thing too, and my father's out there somewhere. It's my fight as much as it is yours. We're not asking anyone for help, said Fingleton. I don't need you to ask. I'm volunteering, said Talia. We can't take you with us. This is police business. Let us do our job, said Fingleton. You're wrong. It's all our business, said Talia. Fingleton sighed. This creature is a danger to the town, but if we let everyone loose in the forest to find this thing, we cannot do our job, which is to protect you. Please, we ask that you all go directly to your homes and stay there. Do not leave for any reason until directed otherwise. And if anything happens, call the station. A couple at the back got up and left, and the others soon followed. Mae McKenna put the microphone back in the stand, and there were no other options. If the weather was coming, it would be dangerous on the unsealed roads, or for anyone coming north. And the forest was no place to be in a storm. Home and behind a locked door was the safest place to be. Mark Potter's wife dragged Talia out by the arm, and I guess she was staying with her. The room emptied, aside from Chief Fingleton and Elliot, and I approached Fingleton. I'll go with you, me and Boxer, I said. I know those woods better than anyone. Fingleton cleared his throat. We don't need you, Walker. This is police business. Like hell it is. The girl is right. We're all stuck up here without anyone to help. If I let you two go out there in this weather, you'll get lost or worse before you ever lay eyes on this thing. Look, you need me, and Boxer can smell it. You need him too. He might be able to help, Elliot said. Fingleton rubbed at his face with his hands. My duty is to protect, not to put in harm's way. I know the risks, I said. I've seen what this thing does. Whatever happens, your conscience is clear. Mine won't be if you go out there and don't come back, or you do come back, but you don't find this thing. Fingleton looked at the ceiling. It was as if he was searching for a solution written above. And then he sighed. All right, you can come. First light at the station, but you come under my watch and play by my rules. Do you understand? Fingleton strode to the exit, and Elliot followed. I buttoned up my jacket, and I went back to the laundry room at the motel, and I laid by Boxer. We huddled on the floor, wrapped in blankets. Outside, the weather worsened. I didn't sleep at all. Light finally came, filtered gray by the clouds. Snowfall lingered into the day, and the postcard view of the lake and mountain from the motel was nothing more than a white haze. At the station, a red truck pulled up, and Fingleton exited.
So it's random.
His wife was behind the wheel. She was ashen-faced with their 2 young children in the back. They were silent and still. Fingleton waved as the car turned a wide circle and went back the way it came. He tapped at the glass door of the station, and out came Elliot. No one called last night, said Elliot. Good, Fingleton said. We drove to the edge of town where the police had put up a barricade to stop anyone taking the road around the lake to the forest. The barricade had blown over in the wind, and we put it back. We'll walk from here, Fingleton said. We clambered down the slope and walked out onto the lake toward the woods. And snow blew heavy in the strengthening wind, and out on the lake everything was white. We could no longer see the town behind us, nor the forest and the mountains before us. And Fingleton, Elliot, and Boxer and I walked on, leaning into the wind to steady ourselves. I smelled the trees before I saw them. The scent was thin through the snow. We're almost at the tree line, I said, shouting over the sound of the wind. The green of the trees pierced the blanket of white, and we stepped off the lake onto land. The trees were a partial shelter against the wind and snow, and we crouched together against the cold. We wiped the snow from our faces and clothes. Should we go back and wait for the others to clear? Elliot said. We're not going back, Fingleton said. I've been out in worse than this. When? Said Elliot. Where should we look for this thing? Fingleton said, turning to me. Both times I've seen it, I said. It was in the trees not far from my cabin. I never saw where it went after it took the people, but the second time, as I followed the trail through the woods, I smelled something, and Boxer did too. It was something familiar. The penny didn't drop at the time, but now I know. It smelled like the inside of that coal mine. I pointed up in the direction of the mine, partway up the mountain. And if I were looking for a place to wait this storm out, that's exactly where I'd be. Then that's where we start looking, Fingleton said. We dusted the remaining snow from our shoulders and took our rifles in our hands and walked into the forest.
I've got a type on.
We hadn't gone far when I turned at a rustling behind me. A flash of yellow rushed up from behind me, and I raised my rifle. Who's there? I shouted. The yellow form slowed and threaded through the trees. It was Talia. She raised her hands, and I lowered my rifle. She had come. She said she would, but I'd taken it for bravado. But she had meant it. What are you doing? I said. I want to come, Talia said. Go home, girl. Fingleton pushed past me and stood over Talia. I came to help, Talia said. Go back to town. It's dangerous out here with the weather and this creature running around, said Fingleton. Unlike you, I've seen the creature and I know what it does, she said. It sends its feelers out and blows smoke into your mouth and it infects you. That's why I brought this. Talia held up a firefighter's mask. I joined as a volunteer last year. It might protect us. Only the suit is small. They had to get it custom made for me. I'm the only one who will fit in this one. The yellow Talia wore now made sense. What I first took as something she wore against the wet snow was in fact a firefighter's uniform. I couldn't fault her thinking. The black smoke from the creature did exactly as she said, and the smoke mask might just work. Fingleton put his hands on Talia's shoulders. Go home, Talia. What would your father think of me if I let you walk into these woods with us? He would rather that I was out here with you trying to help than back in town waiting for this thing to come and get me and everyone else, she said. I think that is what you prefer and not what he would have, Fingleton said. Talia stood her ground. She stared up at Fingleton, stone-faced and determined. I thought it would take Chief Fingleton dragging her back to town to stop her. And he might have done it too, but Elliot heard something coming from the woods and snapped his neck around. What is that? I listened, and it came again. It was Boxer, and while we had been arguing, he had left and gone off into the forest. Boxer barked. With the wind, I couldn't tell how far he was. Let's bring Talia. We don't have time to debate this right now,
Watch
I
this.
said.
He's gonna kill everything.
Keep close to me, both of you. I ran toward the sound. It is a tricky business, pinpointing sound in a forest. The trees have a tendency to reflect noise, and the wind made it that much worse. There was another bark, and I changed direction and leaped over a fallen tree, and there was Boxer, the black streak on his back, a beacon against the snow. Boxer was quiet now and trotting through the trees. His head was raised. He ran like this when he found a scent on the wind. And I called to him, but he didn't stop. The wind blew in my face and extinguished the sound as soon as it left my lips. I ran parallel with Boxer, and my boots crushed in the snow. Boxer never turned his head, and something had his attention, but I couldn't see it. I jumped behind him and called for him to stop, and Boxer held up and he turned. Why did you run off? I said to the dog. I looked for the others, and I was alone, and around me were trees and snow. No Chief or Elliot or Talia in her yellow firefighter's suit. I found Boxer. Come to my voice, I yelled at the others. Boxer turned his nose to the sky, and he turned from me and trotted up the hill and deeper into the forest, turning back to see if I was following. Heel, Boxer, I said, jogging after him. Boxer growled and continued undeterred. We weaved our way up the hill. The snow thinned on the ground beneath the canopy of the forest, but it was still thick enough for Boxer's paws to disappear as he moved. His pace quickened. He had the scent now, and I too could smell something filtering through the trees on the wind. Boxer stopped and raised his head to the sky, and he barked. High above, just below the treetops, the black tail of the creature swayed like a cobra waiting to strike. At the tip of the tail, the tentacles writhed and blew out wisps of black smoke. I stepped ahead of Boxer and I raised my rifle, peering through the gaps between the trees and looking for the creature. I couldn't see it. I opened my mouth to call out and notify the others of my whereabouts, but immediately closed it again. I didn't know if the creature would hear me instead. Behind me, Boxer growled. I shot a glance at him and my heart sank. The black tentacles at the tip of the creature's tail had wrapped themselves around his head. The white fur on his cheeks was barely visible, and he growled once more. I took a step toward him, and he lowered his head. And in the dull gray light, I saw a flash of white from between the tentacles around Boxer's head. He had bared his teeth at me. Boxer charged me, and I threw out my hands and grabbed at the underside of his torso. I fell back into the snow from surprise as much as anything. Boxer's chest vibrated as he growled again, and I heard a short snarl as he opened his jaws and went for my neck. One tooth caught me on the jaw, and I felt the skin rip and warm blood spill down my neck. He had meant to kill me. I threw Boxer off and turned to my side and grabbed for my rifle, which I had dropped in the snow. It was out of reach. Boxer leapt once more, and I had time only to cover my head, and then came the crack of a gunshot. It echoed off the trees, and then another shot and another, and Boxer went limp. "Are you okay?" It was Fingleton. He burst through the trees and stood over me with his gun pointed ahead into the forest, and I rolled my torso and pushed Boxer off my stomach. The body made a thud in the snow. Boxer lay stiff and unmoving. The tentacles of the creature were gone from his head, though. I thrust out a hand, but withdrew it when I saw black smoke exiting Boxer's nostrils. The smoke had infected him and turned him against me. Above, the black tail of the creature retreated, and I followed the direction of Fingleton's rifle, and there it was. It must have stalked closer after it had taken hold of Boxer, and Elliot and Talia came running out. "I think I landed a couple of blows and it's running. Come on, we have to follow it," Fingleton said. He bent down and grabbed my arm and lifted me from the snow, and I tumbled and went back and stood over Boxer. He blinked and shook his head and rolled himself to his feet, and then he coughed and ejected a puff of black smoke, and then more came. "That's it, buddy, breathe it out," I said. I held out my hand and he buried his snout in it. I had Boxer back. Fingleton ran ahead with Elliot and Talia in tow, and I grabbed my rifle from the snow and we ran after them and soon caught up. They were following the creature and the long black tail it trailed behind, and their heads raised to the sky. "Be careful," I shouted after them. "That thing can't be far away. We're running north and uphill." The trees thinned out and the creature was nowhere to be seen. And soon we would be out of the thickest part of the woods and the creature would be exposed, and so would we. I tried to get my bearings and I found a landmark. And through the trees, the brick smokestack came into view. We were almost at the mine. We came across the old road that cut through the forest, and the creature was still up ahead and heading north but outpacing us. We followed it until we were out of the trees and onto the great flat pad of compacted gravel created for the mine, and the metal structures that once serviced the mine stood dormant like ancient statues. The perimeter chain fence rocked in the wind, and the road led to a double-wide gate swinging wildly and periodically smashing against the fence. Somewhere beneath the snow there must be a failed padlock, either broken by the creature or some kids who had come up to the mine to mess around. The creature had disappeared. Ahead was the mouth of an old mine tunnel. At the entrance to the tunnel there was another gate, or at least there used to be. The steel gate had been ripped from its hinges and lay mangled and bent in the snow. The black void of the mine tunnel was now exposed. A trail cut into the snow like an irrigation ditch leading directly into the mine. "Keep your rifles pointed at the entrance," I said. There was a small building to the right of the mine entrance. It housed electrical switchboards and a backup generator that would kick in if there was ever a power outage. The door was locked, and I kicked it until it loosened from its hinges, and with a final effort, I ripped it free. The generator was still there, mounted to the concrete floor. And up until 5 years ago, the government had been running tours in the mine, but it failed to excite the same interest as sled dog rides up to the lake for ice fishing, and so they had stopped. I hoped the generator had some fuel in the tank and still worked, and I pushed the ignition, and the machine came to life. Outside, Elliot and Fingleton had their guns pointed at the entrance. Talia stood behind them in her yellow suit. "I think the lights came on," Elliot said. The string of lights on the roof of the tunnel had indeed come on. "Don't get too close," Fingleton said. At the entrance, I could see down the tunnel until the bend 100 yards ahead. Light from the bulbs overhead spilled onto the walls and reflected off the dark steel rails and timber slats. On the floor where the rail carts once moved the coal. There was no sign of the creature. A warm breeze, like an exhaled breath, hit my face, and I took off my gloves and I held up my hands. The tunnel was warm. Not just warm compared to the blizzard outside, but warm like there was a heater blowing hot air down the tunnel. There was something hot in there. "It's in there," I said. "Can you see it?" Elliot said. "No." "Then how do you know it's in there?" Fingleton said. "I can feel it. The tunnel is hot. The creature is hot. The creature's in the tunnel." "But what do we do now?" Elliot said. "We go inside," said Fingleton. Part 4. I didn't like the plan.
Alright, I'm gonna go get a drink. I'm pretty tired, I'm not gonna lie. Pretty sleepy. I can make it. Just another hour. Whew. Alright, back to our story.
And neither did Fingleton. The only one who was comfortable was Elliot, who seemed satisfied with his position at the rear of the party. Talia had proposed it. "The creature," she said, "always sends its tail out first. It never comes by itself. If I go in first, I'll have my mask on and I'll be safe. Anyone else might get infected. Once we know where the tail is, we know where the creature is. The rest of you can shoot it." There was some logic to it, but it didn't feel right. Fingleton paced about for a few minutes, going over it in his head. If this went sour, he'd be the one they'd blame. 3 grown men and a husky allow a teenage girl to lead them into danger, only for the girl to succumb as the rest watched on. It might be the best shot at finding and killing the monster, if it was even possible to kill it, but he would not allow it. No, Fingleton said finally. The dog and Walker are up front and I'm right behind them. The dog can smell it. His name is Boxer, I said. Boxer can smell it. He's the one who will lead us to it, and Talia and Elliot will stay near the tunnel entrance. You can go inside out of the wind, but not beyond the bend in the tunnel ahead. If it gets past us, use your weapons. If you get into trouble, get out of its way. And that was it. Fingleton overruled Talia. Boxer and I led Fingleton into the mine. The tunnel walls were damp, the heat mixing with the cold from outside forming trickles of condensation. I had come down this tunnel for years, riding open carriages deep into the mountain to extract coal from the seam and riding back out with blackened hands and lungs and weary from the effort. But it was different now. The mine was lifeless without the miners and the constant chatter and the grind of metal wheels against the rails. The smell, though, it was the same. I hadn't smelled it in years, but the odor lit up the section of my brain where memory is stored. The creature shared that smell. It was quiet and still inside the tunnel, the constant whistling of the wind no longer in our ears. And it was warm. The heat combined with the closeness of the walls on all sides created a claustrophobia I had never felt when I worked in the mine. Boxer reached the bend in the tunnel. Hold him up, Fingleton said. I don't want to lose him in the tunnel. He won't go far without me, I said. He didn't wait out in the forest. He had me on that one. Boxer, hold up, I said. Boxer stopped at the bend and we bunched closer together, and I clicked my tongue at Boxer and he moved on. Ahead the tunnel forked into two, and Boxer stopped. Which way do we go? Fingleton said. Boxer sniffed at the ground and at each tunnel, and he chose the tunnel to the right. We followed it, and it was getting so warm I unbuttoned my coat. Boxer turned and faced us, and he sniffed the air and he moved on. It's getting warmer, I said. We crept deeper into the mine, and the lights ended up ahead at the three-way fork in the tunnel. Boxer reached the fork and stepped out of the light into the darkness. Boxer, I whispered. Fingleton and I skipped down to the fork. Boxer was ahead and sniffing the floor. Which way did he go? Fingleton said. Boxer, I whispered, but I couldn't see him. Fingleton pulled a small flashlight from his belt and searched each of the three shafts. The beam of light was weak and didn't penetrate the tunnels far before the darkness swallowed up the light. I wished for my old helmet with the light, but it was back at the cabin hanging on the wall. I took off my glove and held my hand out to each of the shafts. The middle shaft felt the warmest. This one, I said. Fingleton trained his torch on the middle shaft and we moved forward, feeling at the rails on the floor with our feet. The heat softened and the coolness came off the walls. This might not be the way, I said. Fingleton's torch illuminated a dead end. We couldn't go any further. Where's Boxer? Fingleton said. We turned at a tapping sound, and Fingleton shone his light and caught the glow of Boxer's eyes. He returned to my feet and pointed his nose back from where we had come. Stay where I can see you this time, I said. We followed Boxer back to the three-way fork, and Boxer led us to a shaft on the right. We felt our way down the tunnel and rounded another bend, and ahead something glowed. On the left side of the shaft, an enormous crater opened like someone had set off a bomb. The glow illuminated the tracks, which bent into the shape of an S at the entrance. What the hell is that? Fingleton said. That's not part of the mine, I replied. We raised the barrels of our rifles and crept forward, and at the edge of the opening, a crater opened inwards and down. The inside glowed hot, and somewhere at the bottom were glowing rivers of red. It was what you would expect to see if you peered down into a volcano about to erupt and send lava spewing into the sky. We pulled back away from the crater. I crouched back from the edge and blinked my eyes, and with each blink I saw red of the pit, the way you do when a bright light lingers after it is shut off before going to sleep. But it was not all red. A black shape broke up the red. It was the creature. It was down there. "Did you see it?" I said. Fingleton didn't respond. He stumbled backward and fell. From a sitting position, he raised his rifle in the direction of the shaft. I turned and saw black limbs extend up from the hole and take grip of the ground, followed by the body of the creature. It was like a spider extracting itself from a drain pipe, and it lifted itself and stood over us. Its red eyes glowed red and hot, and Boxer barked up at the creature. Fingleton shot, and I followed suit. We emptied our weapons into the creature, and it let out a piercing wail, and it fell back into the shaft and disappeared. "Did we kill it?" Fingleton said. "I don't know," I replied. I inched toward the shaft and watched as the arms of the creature reappeared. It was coming back for more. "Run," I said. We ran back in the direction we'd come. We made it to the section of tunnel with the lights overhead, and I looked behind and saw the creature on the move and coming down the tunnel toward us. We were almost at the first fork when the lights above flickered and then went out. I collided with Fingleton and we both went to the ground. I heard Fingleton tapping against something plastic and his flashlight came on. The beam of light pierced the dark and he pointed it down the tunnel and grabbed me by the arm, and with the other I scooped up Boxer. We were up and running and were through the fork when Fingleton stopped dead. The sound of footsteps echoed in the tunnel, but they weren't ours. Fingleton searched with the flashlight and caught Elliot. He sprinted past us as if we weren't there and headed deeper into the mine. He was going to the creature. Elliot's head was covered in a ball of black. It had him. "Stop!" Fingleton yelled. We ran back to the fork and Fingleton shone his torch down the tunnel. And Elliot stood before the creature. He turned to us. "It wants me to go with it," he said. Elliot raised his rifle and turned it on us, and there were flashes of...
I need to plug in this on the PC here so I can. Continue this story. Because I don't want to miss this story. If only I could find where to plug the headphones in at. So now I do this, do this, do this, rotate audio speakers. Okay. 2 seconds, 2 seconds. Shut these off. Oh, man. All right.
...of light as he shot. I grabbed Fingleton and pulled him back down the tunnel and around the corner. "Are you hit?" I said. "I don't think so. We've got to get out of here," I said. "What about Elliot?" "He's gone." Fingleton rose and ran toward Elliot and the creature, refusing to believe he couldn't help. He reached the corner and more shots drove him back. Elliot cackled and it echoed off the walls. And then the creature growled and Elliot screamed. I grabbed Fingleton. "He's gone. We have to go now." The chief came to his senses and we raced down the tunnel to the exit, the flashlight jerking in Fingleton's hand. Ahead, Talia lay in a crumpled yellow mass in the middle of the rails. We got to her and Fingleton picked her up. We staggered the remaining distance to the entrance of the tunnel, lighting our way ahead, and Fingleton shot the flashlight back behind us, but there was only an empty mine shaft. We spilled out into the snow, and the icy wind took my breath away, and I zipped my jacket back up. And Fingleton pulled the mask off Talia, who wiped away strings of sweaty hair from her eyes. The tail of the creature, it came for us. It came for me first, but I put my mask on and it couldn't get through. And then it went to Elliot, she said, and the lights went out. She pulled up her knees and buried her face in her arms. She didn't need to be told what had happened. Elliot was not with us when we exited the tunnel, and that told the whole story. What do we do now, Chief? I said. Fingleton looked at his watch. It'll be getting dark soon, he said. The storm had not abated, and the wind whipped across the open ground between the mine and the forest edge. The corrugated iron on a nearby structure bowed upwards and slammed back down on its supports with a bang. The broken gate swung away from the fence only to be driven back by the wind, the metal clanging upon impact. We go back to town, said Fingleton. We won't make it back to town before dark, I said, but we could make it to my cabin. It'll get us out of the weather. Fingleton nodded and he helped Talia to her feet. We rushed through the snow, watching behind for the black creature and its snake-like emissary, but it wasn't there. Night came before we reached the cabin, and we needed the flashlight for the last part of the journey. Snow covered the cabin, and inside it was freezing. I lit a fire and a couple of candles, and we huddled around warming our fingers. Boxer collapsed on his bed of blankets, and he closed his eyes. Fingleton and Talia glanced around the inside of the cabin by the candlelight. In all the years of living out in the forest, I had never entertained a guest inside my home. I know it isn't much, I said. Well, we're glad to have it, Fingleton said. I'll put on a pan of beans, I said. I took the pan down from its hook and placed it on top of the stove, and I pointed to the shelf behind where Talia stood, and she moved for me. The tins were there, and I opened them. We ate in silence, and the world outside was dark, and the wind did not relent. I didn't have plates for everyone, so I ate last and from the pan. When we finished, the cabin was warm, and I offered Talia my cot, and I covered it in a deerskin I took from the long box under the bed. She sat and leaned against the back wall of the cabin, and she cradled her helmet like a teddy bear. It's not your fault what happened to Elliot, I said. Your helmet worked just like you said it would. You shouldn't have come, Fingleton said. He was like a stern father speaking down to a misbehaving child. Leave the girl alone, I said. I don't need you to speak for me, Talia said. I'm capable of speaking for myself and making my own decisions. I am not a child. You are a child, Fingleton said. And you're not my father, so stop speaking to me as if you were, said Talia. Fingleton lowered his head and dropped his hands from his hips. He didn't need to be told what happened to George Visser. The girl's father had gone with the creature, same as Elliot just had. No, I'm not your father, he said, and silence filled the room. How did you get Mrs. Potter to agree to you going out in the storm? I asked. I didn't. I climbed out the window in the dark and went to the lake and I waited. I figured you'd be on foot in this weather. I expected as much, and I gave the girl a half smile, but her eyes were cast down on her plate. Are we safe here? Talia said, looking up. I don't know, I said. I wanted to answer in a way that gave the girl some comfort, but I figured she would see straight through me, so I gave her the unfiltered truth. Talia fell asleep first, lying on my cot with her back to us. She lay above the deerskin and remained in her yellow firefighter's uniform. I lifted the helmet Talia had used against the beast from beside the cot, and I tried it on my head, and it wouldn't fit. I put it back, and Fingleton and I propped ourselves up on the floor and cradled our rifles. You think we did any damage when we shot it? Fingleton asked. I don't know. It squealed when we hit it, but it never went down and took Elliot. He didn't deserve to go like that, said Fingleton. None of them did, I said. When I heard the racket when we shot it, I thought we had it, said Fingleton. but I doubt we can kill it with what we have in our hands, so we're stuck. We're stuck until the weather clears and the bridge to the south opens and we can convince someone there's a science fiction villain living in an old mine shaft. We will need a rocket launcher or a damn nuke because bullets don't seem to work. By then, the whole damn town might be gone. It'll be my head on the chopping block when they search for someone to blame. Don't beat yourself up, I told him. My job is to protect this town, and this happened on my watch, said Fingleton. How could you have known what we were up against, I said. Rutowski last summer, for one. I saw the burned trees. Something wasn't right about that, but I sat on it. And when it took the Potter kid, we should have got someone up here. We could have beat the weather if we'd acted immediately. We didn't. Now what's done is done. And I promised my kids before I left that I would take care of whatever monster was hiding in this forest. They believed me. I believed it myself. My wife, though, she hugged me like she was never going to see me again. She might be right. I've never come up against anything I couldn't handle, but everyone meets their measure at some stage. We aren't beaten yet, I said. You saw what this thing is, said Fingleton. You saw what it can do. That thing is a force of nature. It'll consume whatever's in its path. So we stop it, I said. Well, how do we do that? Said Fingleton.
I'm turning around,
Haven't figured it out yet, but we will. We have to. Otherwise, we might as well walk out there in the snow right now and go for a long sleep. There was a long block of silence, and Fingleton fiddled with his rifle, turning it in his hands.
Okay, now I'm good.
Why do you do it? I mean, why do you live out here all alone? He asked, breaking the silence. I couldn't be in that town anymore, I said. Well, why not go south? Said Fingleton. I couldn't do that either. I didn't want to leave. It must be a hard life up here, he said. It was hard at first, and then I took to it like a bird to the sky. And now when I'm in town, it's like there's static in my head. The sound of cars and bikes and boats and people talking and electricity wires overhead and towers for your phone scrambles my brain. Out here, my head is clear. I live off the land out here, and it feels like what I was always meant to do. I'm never going back now. Well, the people in town tell stories about you, he said. You're the wild man with the long beard and the shaggy hair who drinks the blood of bears. People don't believe that, I said. Oh, you'd be surprised. My kids are afraid of you, but that's the stories that scare them. We fell silent for a time. The wind buffeted the cabin walls and the wood creaked under the pressure. I had endured storms out here before, the sort that doesn't let up and you think might never end. Storms that darkened the daylight hours and left you with nothing to do but ride it out. And sometimes you consider the possibility of the storm won't ever end, that this was the new normal. I felt this now, and I looked at the back of the window, not confident I'd ever see light again. Everyone in town knew about what was going on with Lacey, Fingleton said, breaking the silence again. Bouncing back between you and George, I convinced myself it was part of the reason he went missing and Potter had his brains blown out, back when I thought it was you who did it. If I'd wanted to do anything like that, I said, I would have done it a long time ago. I wouldn't have waited until now. It was a terrible thing when Lacey passed, he said. Yeah, it was. She was too young for it, I said. Fingleton looked over at sleeping Talia, her shoulders rising and falling rhythmically. She's got a real sense of responsibility, that one, he said. That she does. Is that why you stayed and didn't go south after Lacey died? I gave Fingleton a sideways glance, and he gave a half smile and continued. She looks like you, said Fingleton. George was a yellow-bellied fool, and she's not. The apple either fell a long way from the tree or it didn't. Don't take liberties, Chief, I warned. Talia stirred in her bed. Get some sleep, I said, and drained my tea, and I laid on the floor, using my jacket as a pillow. In the corner of the room, Boxer half slept, his nose twitching from time to time, waiting for the scent of the creature. I shut my eyes and listened to the wind, adding my ears to Boxer's nose for any sign of the creature, but fatigue overwhelmed me and I was soon asleep and dreaming. I was working the night shift in the mine.
This is my most hated
with a
mission
dozen
right here.
other men I loaded into a trolley and we were thrust into the shaft, the steel wheels grinding against the rails. We switched on our torches atop our helmets and supplemented the light on the ceiling of the tunnel. Along the way, we passed square cages containing yellow canaries, our warning system for an overload of carbon monoxide. We trained our torches on the birds, ensuring they were upright and on their perches, and we moved on, leaving the birds in their cages in the darkness. We reached the end of the shaft and relieved a crew of men covered in soot. They took our seats in the cart and were taken away. And then we went to work, drilling and blasting and hacking our way deeper into the coal mine. Soon, we were as dirty as the men we had relieved and were coughing and wiping away sweat with blackened forearms. I worked with my pick on the hard, unforgiving rock, and with each swing, rock pinged and a chunk of black fell out of the wall. Soon, I was wading knee-deep through it and unable to move, but I kept swinging, and rock kept coming away, burying me deeper and deeper. I gave a heave with the pick, every muscle working to drive it as hard as I could into the rock. The pick stuck and I pulled to work it loose and a wall crumbled and revealed a great open cavern. Inside it burned hot. I turned my face away and I held my arm to protect my eyes. I tried to back up, but my legs buried wouldn't move. From the cavern, a plume of black smoke filled the tunnel and turned everything dark. Someone lifted me into the trolley, and I raised my head and gasped for air. We flew down the tunnel as fast as the trolleys would go. The black smoke followed us, threatening at each moment to overrun and consume us. My light caught a cage, and the canary lay at the bottom on its back, stiff and unmoving. We made it to the light and the open air, and I was lifted by an unseen force out of the trolley and up into the sky. Black smoke spewed out of the mouth of the mine and from the brick smokestack to the side. Yellow corpses of canaries littered the side of the mountain and must have numbered in the thousands. A black jet of smoke spread and covered the mine site and all its buildings. It moved onto the forest and consumed the green of the trees, and soon the entire landscape was dark and black and dead. I was on the frozen lake, sitting on a small stool. Before me was a small hole cut in the ice, and the line from a fishing rod disappeared below the surface. The line jumped, and I reeled in the rod and pulled up a trout and hugged it to my chest, but the fish didn't kick. I dropped it to the ice, and it was dead, its open eye blackened. The sky above turned from white to gray and then to black, and the ice at my feet cracked and spread in all directions like a spider's web, and the ice gave way and I fell into the water in the darkness. As I woke, the darkness dissipated, replaced by the inside of the cabin. It was light, and there was no noise. During the night, the storm had abated and the wind and the snow had stopped. Boxer sniffed at the bottom of the door and he whined. Talia stood at the window, her face illuminated by the light. Her skin was pale and the uniform she wore shone yellow. She looked out, her eyes wide, and she didn't move. I kicked Fingleton, and he awoke with a start. What's going on? I went to the window and stood behind Talia, and I looked out. The fresh snow shone a bright white under a clear blue sky. Something was moving. The black mass of the creature strode through the trees and into the clearing. It stood and turned its body to face the cabin, and at its feet the snow melted, sending a plume of water vapor into the sky. "Chief, you better get over here," I said. "What do we do?" Talia said.
It's gonna
Let's
kill
wait
her.
and see what it does, I said. The creature did not stand for long. It left the cover of the forest and made directly for the cabin. "Get away from the window," I said, and pulled Talia to the side. Fingleton had come to the window and I pushed him into the corner. Boxer turned in a circle by the door and he barked. "Quiet," I said. The light from the window dimmed and the cabin darkened. The tail of the creature skirted across the window. The tentacles at the end writhed and spewed black smoke. The black tail raised itself and scratched on the timber above our heads, and a chunk of snow loosened from the roof and fell to the ground with a thud. The vertical flue extracting smoke from the stove rattled and distorted. "It's trying to find a way in," Fingleton said. "It's only a matter of time until it succeeds," I said. "This isn't Fort Knox." "We can't just wait here to die," Fingleton said. "We need to get it away from the cabin," I said. "One of us has to go and the creature will follow." "Go where?" Fingleton said. "To the lake," I said. "This thing is hot. It lives in fire. Maybe it's cold that can kill it. We get it out onto the lake, and if we're lucky, it melts through the ice and it falls into the water." "That's suicide," Fingleton said. "Even if you make it to the trees, once the tail of the creature finds you and wraps itself around your head, you'll be under its spell." "It can be done," I said. "It's downhill to the lake, and you don't stop and you don't look back. Maybe it can be done, and then at the lake you coax it out onto the ice. Maybe, just maybe it'll work." I trailed off at that statement and I shook my head. The flue shook again, and one of the timber slats framing the penetration in the roof split and a hole opened. Cold air pushed into the cabin, and the flue, and now free of its shackle, swung wildly and bounced around the gash in the roof. Fingleton's eyes darted around the room, and he raised his hands to the wall of the cabin, which shook and groaned against the force of the creature. I grabbed at my boots and shoved my feet into them and grabbed my rifle. I wasn't about to wait around for a volunteer. There was no time. I would lead the creature to the lake or die trying. Talia stood and took her firefighter's helmet from the cot and clasped it on her head. "I'll go," she said. "The smoke from the creature can't get through my helmet." I opened my mouth to protest, and then the yellow of the firefighter's uniform flashed before me, and Talia turned the lock on the door and turned the handle and swung open the door, and she was gone. "Stop her," Fingleton said. He lunged at the door, but I closed it on him and grabbed his arm. "Just wait." "What are we waiting for? The creature's out there," Fingleton demanded. Heavy footsteps from the creature sounded outside the door. It was moving back around to the front of the cabin. The flue in the cabin stopped shaking, and light returned to the window. The creature moved toward the forest in pursuit of the small girl in the yellow uniform. Talia scampered downhill and disappeared into the forest. The creature followed, leaving a wake of rising water vapor from its hot skin. "She won't make it," Fingleton said. "She won't make it. It's going to get her." I released Fingleton's arm and opened the door. Boxer ran out, and I whistled at him, and he stopped and he waited in the snow. "Grab your rifle and let's go," I said. I squinted at the low-hanging sun. The wind had died and the snow had stopped. The storm had passed. It was cold, and I stepped into the thick layer of fresh snow and I watched the creature disappear into the forest. The creature had blackened the cabin where it stood. I lifted my knees high to negotiate the thick layer of snow and stepped into the melted path left by the monster. I set off at a run with Boxer at my heels and Fingleton in close pursuit. The black back of the creature flitted in and out of view between the trees. It was moving fast, faster than we were moving. Fingleton was right. Talia would never make it, and I cursed myself for not grabbing the girl's arm. I should have known she would do it. Ahead, the creature slowed to a crawl, stalking through the trees like a lion in reeds, readying to ambush an unsuspecting gazelle. The tail thrust out into the open air and wound its way through the treetops, and at the tip the tentacles pulsed in anticipation of wrapping around its prey. Talia scampered down the slope and hurdled a fallen log. Her trailing foot caught a stray branch stub, and she tumbled into the snow and out of view. And as fast as she fell, she raised herself, brushing the snow off her shoulders. The tail closed in and Talia turned and immediately set off once more at a run. The grotesque tail whipped forward. The tentacles at the tip fanned out and pointed at the escaping Talia. It would soon have her. I raised my rifle and started shooting. Fingleton fell in beside me, and together we pelted the creature. It let out a high-pitched screech and snapped its head in our direction. The red eyes flashed and its burning insides glowed from its open mouth. The black tail flicked around like a cracking whip, and the creature hissed, ejecting a plume of black smoke. Boxer snarled and barked at the creature, and replied in turn with a screech that lowered Boxer's ears. "What now?" Fingleton said. "You circle that way and I'll go this way. Head to the lake. One way or another, we need to get this thing out on that ice."
Alright.
We broke.
So it's a Dixie Cryptid Siege of Canary Hill. We're at 1 hour and 42 minutes, 15 seconds. There's 11 minutes left. I'm going to go finish it in bed. But for now, I'm out. Thanks for hanging out with me. Or if you somehow find this on YouTube, please just like, subscribe. Please.